What's up, party people, and welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the upcoming Classic servers. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the upcoming release of World of Warcraft Classic. Today, we've got another packed episode for you as we cover off on the game's recent stress test that certainly lived up to its name. There's a great chat all about grinding and the economy with the amazing Frostadamus, a man who regularly and deservedly gets placed at the top of many people's lists of favorite Classic content creators. So I do hope you enjoy that one-on-one. After that, we've got a chat that's a little bit off the beaten path, but if you have a bit of faith in me, I promise I tie it back into World of Warcraft, and we talk with a bunch of listeners all about a topic that everyone's been chatting about lately in Game of Thrones, as we discuss the parallels between GoT and WoW, including a few of our quick thoughts on Season 8 while we're at it. The show then finishes with an important call for our listeners in school to take on board, as we hear all about balancing World of Warcraft and studies, given that we now know the Classic release date will be somewhat of an issue for those of you currently seeking a bit of higher learning. Now, you all know the drill by now. This is a community-based podcast, so if you like what you're hearing, please do join the Discord now and keep the conversations going with us all over there. Follow me on Twitter at Count2Classic or email me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com if you'd like to call into the show, make a suggestion, or just say hi. Everything you'll need is in the show notes for each episode, along with the show's Patreon link. If you'd really like to help keep the show going over there, or if subscriptions aren't your thing, then you can help keep the lights on at Countdown by checking out the show's tip jar over at Ko-Fi. There's also the show's merch store and some great designs over there for t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and things like that, so be sure to check that out too. And please do, everyone, remember, tell a friend about the show. That's another great way that you can support Countdown to Classic. Simply tell a mate, tell your guildies how much you're enjoying Countdown to Classic, and spread the love. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into it with Calling Countdown. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic call, and I have recruited 5 listeners for this topic, which obviously happened during the week. We're talking stress tests, and that, sort of name for these tests was very, very appropriate because a lot of people did feel very stressed during this process. There were some highs, there were some lows, but maybe Blizzard got all the information that they needed. Now, let's run through the callers, and we've got returnees. Batlord, my man, how are you?
Oh, Josh, I'm doing great. How you doing today, bro?
Very well, mate. It's about 6 a.m. here, and I'm ready to go. Quick call before work. And we've also got Linkson, fresh off the last episode, talking about layering. How are you, our technical expert?
Good morning. Little sunburnt and a little sober, so we should be good to go.
Excellent. And another returnee, Sonosuke. How are you, man?
Doing well, doing well.
Excellent. And 2 new callers. You all know I love the new callers. Corry, how are you?
Doing pretty good.
And finally, we've got Flame Off. How are you, mate?
I'm brilliant, thanks. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. All right, guys, let's get straight into it. And some of you got in, some of you didn't. Some of you felt the stress. Some of you had a great time. I just want to start, and Batlord, will begin with you. Tell us about, real quick, your experience. Did you get in? Did you have fun? Or were you on the outer?
I got to say, Josh, the login screen felt originally classic, man. That login screen, I was getting to look at it for so long. It felt just like the original, man. I felt like it was back 14 years ago. It was.
And a lot of people spent a lot of time with that login screen, so there was definitely time to get familiar. And Sonosuke, I'd turn to you. How about you? Did you battle with that login screen boss, or did you actually get in?
Most of the people who had the stress test invite only did not get in, but I was one of the lucky few who did. There was a really specific reason why I got in.
Okay, what's that?
So the night before, they were restarting their servers, and I assumed that they were stupid enough to restart all of their servers, including the stress test. So I waited around, and as soon as they did it, sure enough, the stress test server went live. I logged in, made a character, started leveling before they were able to close it. So I was able to just log back in on that character.
Oh, fantastic. Now, I would turn to you, Linkson, and sort of just ask, we're going to get into some of the technicalities that you and I have discussed on the show previously and how they apply to this stress test. But just before we get to that, how about your experience? Did you have fun? Did you get in? Did you wait?
I had about 2 hours of queuing, just back and forth, and I finally got in when they started releasing Hogger and Rag and all that fun stuff. So it was fun. I treated it like a true bug test, and I literally logged everything we did. I went from login screen to server timeout or character timeout, and we'll log the times for them. And hopefully that was useful for them. But after 2 hours, I was pretty sick of it. So.
All right. And you told us, mate, just off the call before we started, that you saw somewhere around like you were 2,500 in the line or something, and we'll get to Flame Off soon, who said he was a bit higher. But is that right, Linkson?
Yeah, the highest I got in, I think I had 2 hours worth of logging, and the highest queue that I got up to was 2866, so 2,866 in queue.
Okay.
But the good thing about that, I remember back in 2005, if you were that far in queue, like there's no chance you're going to get in within an hour. And it only took 4 minutes to eventually hit the character creation before the server kicks you, which is typical of 2005 as well. So
there you go. Now, Flame Off, you were saying earlier, well, that's all well and good with your 2.5K, but you were a little bit north of that. What did you see?
Yeah, I managed to get to about 3.2K in the queue. And I kind of got stuck in this infinite time loop where I'd join the queue and then it would count all the way down within a couple of minutes, as Linkson said. And then I would get kicked on the server again when I tried to connect to the stress test server. And I got stuck into this infinite loop for about an hour and a half.
It reminds me of that sort of great Beetlejuice joke where he's, sitting there waiting around at effectively, what is like the DMV, and he's 100 millionth in line and they call for number 2. But Corry, I'll ask for you finally. What was your experience like? Were you waiting? Were you frustrated? Was anyone, well, I'll get to everyone else, but Corry, were you angry or were you fine with what happened?
I was actually pretty okay with it because, that's kind of the whole point, right? Mm-hmm. Try to hammer the servers as best as possible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Well, guys, I'll open the floor a little bit now, and we'll talk about that hammering the servers a little bit later on. This won't be a long call, but we'll get there. But just open to the floor. Anyone jump in. First in, best dressed. Who had a boatload of fun? Who's got some fun stories from what they saw once they got into the stress test?
Oh, I've definitely got one. So after all the waiting back and forth, trying to get in, logging in, getting booted out, then getting kind of stuck in the character creation screen for a while, once I finally got my character, I got Batlord made to the visual specs that I want to have it in the game. I got to have her in there, and I got up to 3 before the servers went down. And it was just nuts seeing so many players all at the same time trying to get all the mobs. I've never explored the space so much, because there were just so few mobs left to get.
So you went the opposite way I went. You went the way of, I'm going to make my character how I'm going to make it. I literally made the ugliest dwarf female I could think with my name, and then put her in the dwarf zone, obviously. But dude, I couldn't go 5 yards without getting killed by Hogger. Like, they changed all the NPCs in my area to Hogger, level 11 elite, and they were just literally wiping the entire area at the end of it. Like, it was just awesome. I was completely in red by the time I even got toward a door.
Excellent. Now, there was obviously some GM shenanigans going on, a lot of wild mobs being spawned in areas where they should not have been, obviously, just all tongue-in-cheek. I didn't know about that Hogger one being placed where he shouldn't have been. I saw the one...
It wasn't just one Hogger, just to correct. It was literally 100 Hoggers replaced the guards in the starting area of the dwarf zone.
Oh, that's fantastic. Obviously,
in the troll and orc zone, they put them at the exit too to try and keep people from leaving the exit. But a few of us, we had people rush in and sacrifice themselves so other people could get out. So that was pretty great.
Oh, that's great. Laying on the barbed wire, going, walk on my back. Now, obviously, there was C'Thun and stuff as well. There was, I'm trying to remember who else they placed in crazy places. Did anyone else see anything weird and wonderful?
So, not personally, because I didn't get in on the nighttime. Well, it was night for me when the stress test went live. There was a few people had, there was Ragnaros, there was a Thrall that was spawned in at some point, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, I heard Thrall was spawned into either Stormwind or the Elwyn Forest. I can't remember which, but yeah, he was just honing.
Now, Flameoff, I'll just ask you, obviously you mentioned that, you were sitting there in queue and you may not have gotten in. Did you still appreciate, obviously, the utility of the exercise, or are you a bit like, rolling your eyes going, fucking all this for nothing?
Yeah, I mean, at first I was frustrated like everyone else because it was my first real taste of Classic. So I've came from private server background, and then it was the real chance for me to try it. Now, yeah, I didn't get in on the first day, and I did get frustrated initially, but actually, I did start to appreciate the reason for that. And it was either the server couldn't handle it, or Blizzard were intentionally limiting the amount of people that could get in just to try and crush the server as best as possible. So I did really appreciate it.
And Sonosuke, I'll turn to you and just sort of ask you guys, did anyone have grand aspirations of, I think there was a level 5 cap on this one, correct me if I'm wrong, but is anyone like, I'm going to get to level 5 as quickly as possible and I'm going to do this quest or that quest and there's something really specific that I want to see or test?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to get like one of the first 5s, so I immediately genned a random gnome, mage, ran immediately to the higher level mobs because I knew the lower level ones are going to get camped. And I was like the first person over to like where the higher level mobs were in the gnome area. And I started farming mobs, not doing quests because there's going to be too hard to get the kill quests done.
Now, guys, I just want to talk about sort of the general insanity of seeing this many level 1 characters obviously dumped into one area, and people are trying to project what may happen when launch actually comes on August 26/27 for Classic. So I just, again, open it to the floor. Does anyone have any sort of thoughts that have been fleshed out a little bit further with what you saw the other day on the stress test and what you think might be coming on launch day?
I'll say that the layering worries me a lot. So I had 2 instances where the layering had issues for me. The first one was on my gnome mage. I was in the starting area, and I got immediately phased into a new lair, and there was 5 hoggers surrounding me, and they all started swinging. And then I immediately got phased back, which is really weird that like the combat could start and then you just somehow evade all those attacks and you're alive still in a different lair. And the other lair was one of my friends was in Asmon's lair for the C'Thun and stuff, and he tried to invite me to his group. And as soon as he invited me to his group, he got layered down into my lair, not me getting layered up. So there's something weird going on with how the layering works, and so the layering scares me a lot. I think it's not done very well so far.
Just hearing you explain it, it's kind of like I'm trying to follow along like Inception. Like, whose dream are we in again? Like, where are we in the plot? But yeah, it's definitely something that people got to see a bit more of. And as the beta continues as well, we're seeing more and more of how this stuff might work. And it is starting to make people wonder a thing or two. But did anyone else experience anything, that made them hold either concerns, or did it make you feel better about launch?
From the technical aspect and the layering aspect, right? I can honestly say this was the point of the stress test, was to hit the log. One, there are different services that are going to be running the WoW client, right? So your authentication service is kind of the first thing you're going to run into, and trying to authenticate you or log you into your character. That was the first point of contention for most people. Getting past that first authentication measure was really hard for some people, and that's normally the case when you look at these client-based things, because everyone's hitting that same point first. And normally, if you can get past that first point, you can start doing stuff, right? So I was able to finally get past that. I was able to play with characters, start to create characters, but then I wasn't able to get past that. I was only able to get to I was getting a timeout on the creation error, right? So that's the second, either API or service or whatever they're running on the back end. So there's different tiers of things where people were getting a in industry term, bottlenecked, and it would either the server would log out or the server would time out or something would happen. And that kind of was the overall purpose of this, which we've all alluded to. But on the same aspect, it wasn't nearly as bad as I remember it being back in the day. I will say that, right?
Let me pick up on that point in terms of it not being as bad as you remember. And I thought we'll just take one more minute just to get through the technical aspect while we're here. Now, for you, was there, you mentioned that it only got about, 4 minutes to get you through to the queue of a couple of thousand, which is, insanity. But, do you feel that, now in 2019 versus what happened in 2004, you can appreciate how far they've come in terms of managing these kinds of crowds trying to access the game? And also, do you know of any, roughly, I know it's maybe too hard to say, but numbers? Do you think Blizzard goes, all right, we will invite, I don't know, 10,000 people and we'll make the server cap at, 5,000 people and we'll just manage the bottleneck from there? Do you know anything about how it might work?
Yes. So in stress testing, also called torturing testing, is where they literally want to bombard the server to a fail point. It's almost like a DDoS. They want to see how long it takes to get to a bottleneck. And my assumption here is we know they had one server up. What we don't know is how many layers they had up, right? And my thought on this was they probably started off with one or two and then started adding them, and then they talked about adding them, hey, we're having trouble with this. Did anyone else get those funky GM tats hey, we're going to try to bring this back up, maybe, right? Or we're going to see if this will be up in a minute or 15, right? So they were being real cheeky with it. But
yeah, I definitely saw that.
Okay, great. I wasn't the only one. I was scared a GM was just playing with me on the other side of the coin. So I think what they were doing was they were intentionally bottlenecking each layer. And my suspicion is they probably invited around 12,000 people. So that for a single server that probably had 3 layers. So we had a bottleneck of 3,000 people always trying to get in so that it was always hitting that cap. That's what I would do. And the numbers can be interchangeable at that point, right? So they could have had 6 layers and they could have had 18,000 people trying to get on at the same time, right? They want to hit those bottlenecks to see, okay, where does it fail? Why does it fail? What happens when it fails? That's the big thing, right? Does the server just bottleneck and restart itself? Or does it start sending people to different load balancers to try to get the queue spread out over a bigger area? Or what, they want to see what happens on that side.
Okay, very good. Now, Corry, I might turn to you for this one and just say, did you have any one thing that you thought was a bit funny that you did that you obviously wouldn't normally do on the actual launch of Classic? Did you start forming raid groups and go after anything in particular, or what did you do once you were in?
I never actually got in.
Oh, that's right.
First I got was character creation, and it was just an infinite loop, timing out. So I got to play the ultimate end boss in the stress test, I like to think.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'll open it up again, guys, and anyone jump in. Did anyone jump in a raid and do anything a bit funky?
I didn't get in the evening as it launched, but what I did see from some streamers, I saw that really cool race there, the Gates of Anchorage. That was really, really interesting.
Yeah, who was it that ran all the way to Silithus? I know one of them did. I just can't remember who.
I think that might have been... I thought it was Asmon, but there was a lot of gnomes, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was like a gnome race all the way. It was quite funny.
Now, guys, let me sort of say this one, and again, I'll open it up to the floor, so anyone jump in. But do you feel that after what you've experienced, you completely understand the exercise and you don't harbor any ill will or anything towards Blizzard? There was a lot of hate on Twitter, and I was kind of like, well, isn't this the exact purpose of a stress test? Not everyone's going to get in. Unfortunately, it does suck. Yes, you didn't get to play Classic, but the point was to, as Linkson just explained, absolutely bombard the servers with people, and some get in, some don't. And there was a bit of F you, Blizzard, but, I understand where people are coming from. This is why we were here. Did anyone sort of feel that, mission accomplished? Well done, Blizz. You might have frustrated me, but I see where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Let's preface this with, Reddit and Twitter are the most wholesome and nice places on the internet, right? So
Exactly.
I think there was a couple of things that I picked up on, and I've had some time to think about. I think Blizzard absolutely learned a lot from the stress test. I think they learned that there's an overwhelming popularity, a lot larger than what they anticipated. And then I also think that they understand that the load on the login server and the handshake is going to be key, especially in the launch.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick off what you were saying off the load that they hit the authentication servers and the character creation servers. This is a tool for the Classic team to get more budget from Blizzard Activision, saying, hey, we had this many people interested in the stress test. We have 100,000 people watching on Twitch, or over 100,000, right? We are more popular on Twitch right now than retail is. Give us more money for more servers or more services or whatever it may be, right? We do this in the business world all the time. Like, hey, we're going to show you how popular this is going to be. Give us more.
Oh, very good. So not so much as a stress test as opposed to a stress test combined with almost proof of popularity.
Maybe, right? I don't know. That's what I do when I need to do something, right? I'm going to take down your server unless you give me money, right? In the security world. It's like, oh, I'm going to show you we need more security professionals. I'm going to start taking things down and you're going to give me more people.
Guys, we'll finish up on this point because I just want to focus on the impressions of launch. Now, Batlord, after this experience through the stress tests, and obviously there's more stress tests to come, do you feel better or worse about what's coming for launch?
Oh, I feel a whole lot better. It was really nice being able to see what they had already. It was great to be able to report a bug here and there, and also to know that anything you buy on the auction house first day is going to cost 10,000.
Hey, Corry, how about you? Better or worse?
Better.
Okay, excellent. Flame Off, how about you? Do you feel better or worse about what's to come, and how do you feel about getting to 10 perhaps on that launch day?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be incredible. When I did get in the following day, about 6 hours after the stress test began, the experience I had was brilliant. The client felt buttery smooth, the whole thing. There was no lag whatsoever. The environment looked brilliant. Yeah, there was a couple of pathing issues here and there, but apart from that, it was extremely good. It was much better than what I thought it was going to be.
Well, I mean, I forgot to even mention, this is obviously some of your, first time with the beta. I've been lucky enough to be playing it for the last 10 days, but you guys just saw it on this day for the first time. And it's great to hear that you actually loved what they have done. Did anyone else jump in for that first time and go, holy shit, they've done really well with Classic?
Yeah, I mean, compared to what it looked like, the terrain, the weather, the client itself, everything's been improved. We still have, to answer people's questions, we still have the ugliest form of the models that I've ever seen with the big butchy fingers and nasty looking fingernails, right? But everything else just looks updated and nice, right? Once I actually got on the server, it played seamlessly. I died a lot and
all right. And Linkson, real quick, feel better or worse for launch day after what you saw and heard?
I feel a lot better. It looks like they still have a lot of work to go with the layering and the phasing of layering and how it's going to work in my opinion, I think you need to be layered at authentication and not in world. Yeah. But that's just me. Okay. I think that'll make it a lot more seamless, but that's just me, right? But better. Definitely better.
Now, I've just been reminded, and Sonosuke, I'll turn to you for the final point on this call as we start to wrap up. But Linkson, you've just reminded me, and I wanted to catch you while I've got you. We've seen the clip now go round of Monkey News farming a mining node, and he did the little trick where he got the node, he logged out to a level 1 character, logged back into his main, and ta-da! That mining node was straight back there, and he hit it up straight away again. This is a point that was raised by Ale as a concern when we first heard about layering. We said, is this going to be something that could potentially be abused for nodes and whatnot? And we talked about Black Lotus and things like that. And then this instance came up, this example came up that has now got thousands and thousands of views of people going, whoa, so that's layering. Linkson, did you see that, and any commentary on that from you?
Yeah, it definitely looks like, so how do I phrase this? if it were in game, it would almost be exploitive of a bug, but it's not a bug because it's in game. I don't know if it's supposed to be there. It's obviously not supposed to be there, right? I hope everyone would agree that's not supposed to be there. It's got enough traction now that Blizzard's really going to look into this and look why that was occurring.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a dynamic respawn almost. To
Yeah.
me, rather than airing.
I saw the video from Monkey News. I would have been really interested to see if he tried to reload a few extra times. So once he did the reload once. If he'd done it 2, 3, 4 times and he was still receiving the same node in the same place, then I'll be worried. But if it's the once, it could be the fact that there's actually only 1 layer or 2 layers available. And then I think when it comes to the layering point and the exploitation of nodes, I'm not as worried as other players, because then I do believe that the economy will adjust for that as well. And what will be really interesting when Classic launches is that we go straight in with potentially Black Lotus, for example, being bind on equip, not bind on pickup. So that might also change the economy.
Yeah, definitely. It's just something that, and that's a very good point to raise there, in terms of, perhaps if we had a larger sample size of this happening, we might know a little bit more about it. Maybe one login is not sort of the thing to create a witch hunt over. However, I do see a lot of people commenting on the subreddit going like, guys, geez, settle down. They've told us layering is only for phase 1 or layering is only for the first few weeks. It doesn't matter. And I'm kind of like, okay, look, if this is the thing, if you can exploit it for nodes, I don't give a fuck if it's only for the first week. That's going to create problems in and of itself, and don't think that won't mess with an economy. Oh, it's only 2 months worth of that shit going on. That's a fucking problem as far as I'm concerned. Do people agree or disagree with me on that?
I definitely agree with you on that, because I've been on the back, like, the economy will adjust itself for this issue, but the problem is it's going to adjust itself at the expense of casuals. So casuals won't be able to make nearly as much gold. They won't be able to buy anything off the auction house because everyone else that plays around the clock will be, charging excess amounts of gold for things. And it will take time for that inflation to come back down once layering's gone. So Josh, I see your point. I see the other point, but at the same time, I think it's getting enough traction that they're going to be looking at this very deeply, because the economy of Classic is so susceptible to these type of things. In BFA, it doesn't matter. Everyone has 1 million gold. Everyone has 2 million gold, right? They keep rolling back numbers on the retail. I don't know why they don't roll back the numbers on gold. Like, if you roll back the economy to try to fix some of the inflation. But I don't think they care about retail. So I'm glad we have Classic.
Okay. All right. Well, look, guys, we'll finish it up. Sonosuke, I'll turn to you. And, that layering conversation, that's far from over as far as I'm concerned. The show, a lot of people are sick of it already. Like, fucking, we know what layering is, move on. But, it's not like I'm not going to talk about it every week on the show, but I do really feel that it's something that warrants a little bit more conversation at certain points. So, stay tuned. We'll update you on more layering news as we get there and as we figure out more about it. Now, Sonosuke, let's wrap up on this. Do you feel better about Classic after what you experienced during this stress test? And what do you think of the stress test to come? You're going back and trying it. Well, you're already in the beta, I believe, so you'll be back there. But what did you think of it all?
Well, I'm actually going to be the only contrarian on this. And my concern is mostly about layering and about the spell batching. I think that I was never concerned about the rest of it, because I figured Blizzard's probably going to get it to a point where it's totally fine. Those two things are so key to the play experience that those were the two things I was worried about. The layering from the stress test was really bad. Like, watching SFan and other people, it looked bad. Experiencing it firsthand, it was really bad. It's not good. It's not conducive to a good gameplay experience. And if they leave it in the system, if they're allowing layering to go on for more than a week or two, most of your hardcore players are all going to be level 60 working on a second ult at that point. And they're going to be exploiting it to the most that they can exploit it to, and it's going to really hurt the entire server as a whole because Blizzard allows it. So I'm really worried about the layering specifically, and then also the batching seems really bad. They need to tune that down a lot, in my opinion. It needs to be no more than 200 ms, and even at that point, I don't know. We'll have to take a look and see how it performs at 200. But being at 400 is not good. It's not conducive to good gameplay, and everything I've seen about it has me very worried for how launch is going to go and how the gameplay experience is actually going to be.
I'm so glad you raised some of those points and that you did play the part of the contrarian there, because I don't want people to think that personally I'm fine with layering or that I'm being quite passive about it. I am still very, very iffy on this notion of layering. Now, I think it doesn't matter what I think or what anyone else thinks, because we're fucking getting it whether we like it or not. So it is a hard position between shut up and take it versus, voicing your concerns. Now, I need to know more before I really sort of start to tell people what I think of it. But from what I've seen so far, I'm very much so of the opinion that this is weird and I'm not super comfortable with it being in Classic, but I'm not going to get a choice. So what's it matter? So guys, what I'd ask at this point is just real quick, let's go down the line. Is anyone coming back for stress test number 2?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, most definitely.
100%.
All right, fantastic. Well, look, it's I guess sitting in queue wasn't so bad, and people will be back, so we'll do it all again in I think it's a week from now. Is that right? Does anyone know the exact date?
I think it's in 2 days.
Oh, 2 days. Well, fuck, there you go. It sneaks up on you. Very good. Well, we shall see what happens, and maybe I'll touch base with some of you and see how stress test number 2 went. But guys, thanks so much for calling in. I do appreciate it at a short moment's notice, and we'll speak to you all later on.
Take care.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
See you
Have a good
guys.
one.
Coming next week on my other podcast, The Cinephiles, we cover 1992's Basic Instinct.
We were just talking about Weird Al the other day, Paddy and I, about how this doesn't happen anymore.
Well, I'm pretty sure it might have been Weird Al, it might have been someone else, did a parody song of Macarena called Masturbator.
I love it.
And
sign that man to a record
don't
deal.
ask me why I remember this, but one of the lines was, "Go and grab a porno, it's the one with Sharon Stone. Hey, Masturbator." And that was kind of the...
Did you write this song?
If you'd like to hear more from the Cinephiles, then please do log on to cinephiles.com. That's SINNERFILES. Or search for the Cinephiles on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. But now, let's get back to Countdown. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic call, and I am so elated to be welcoming this guest to the show. It's someone I've wanted on the show for quite some time. We sort of flew by each other like ships in the night at a certain stage, but obviously a fan sort of brought us together, I think, recently, and it's so great to have you here. Frostadamus, how are you, mate?
Hey, Josh, I'm feeling great. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, mate. I have been absolutely loving your videos over at your YouTube channel, and as I do with all of my guests, I'm going to give you a great chance to plug what you do here at the start. We'll mention it again at the end, but if for some strange reason people are not aware of who you are and why I'm so excited to talk to you, just let people know where they can find you online and what you do.
So, hi guys, my name is Sorin. I have a channel called Frostadamus, which is my mage name. But under this channel, it's not only me working, it's my girlfriend, Sonia, who's right now as we speak, it's working on the video we're going to post today. You can find me on twitch.tv/Frostadamus and on YouTube/Frostadamus. We basically make content about classic World of Warcraft. Basically, this is all at this time. And we're really hyped for the upcoming release of Classic, and hopefully we're going to have a lot of fun.
Oh, mate, it's going to be amazing. And I've got a lot of questions for you about your plans for Classic and all of that. But I wanted to start out we're going to get into a lot of Classic chat, but I think I would be remiss not to start out with your YouTube channel a little bit. Now, unlike, a lot of the content creators out there, including myself in this one, the Classic announcement was made in late 2017. Everyone freaked out, and then a lot of people jumped into the content creation game. You, however, started making videos in late 2016, a full year before the announcement of Classic. So, your passion has been out there for some time now. How did it feel, and what did you think it meant for the direction of your YouTube channel once Classic was announced, when you'd already been putting the work in?
Well, to be honest, I was playing vanilla WoW on and off back since 2005. Up until present day, I was playing with breaks 1 year or 2 years, but I was always coming back to vanilla. And as you mentioned, my channel was made in 2016. And actually, it was 23rd of November 2016, exactly 12th year anniversary of World of Warcraft. And I wasn't aware of that until recently when I checked my channel creation date. I was playing on a private server and I was like, maybe I want to share this grinding spot with people. And it was really fun to find out that it was actually on the anniversary day. I started getting a track on the channel even prior to Classic WoW announcement, because it was the story with the Nostarius shutdown and so on. And while Blizzard tried to shut down the servers, it actually got more attention. And I was a collateral damage with my channel, right? I was getting more traction from something that was supposed to shut down everything. And then when I took a break, because I got a ban 90 days from Blizzard for streaming private servers, and kind of lost my hype. But when Classic was announced, I came back in force and I was so hyped. And that hype, it's still present to this day.
It's funny, I actually didn't realize that you had been banned, and just in doing a little bit of research for this conversation that we're now having, I found that video from way back in the day where you mentioned it, and you obviously looked, a little bit upset, and you said, yep, 90-day ban, I'll wear it. And that's honestly the first I've ever heard of it, which I really find quite, intriguing as well. So you've been through, the ups and the downs, and it's great to see that you're still here making content. Now, I'm just going to come out and say this, the bulk of the community, in my opinion, and I read the forums a lot, Frost. I read a lot. I watch a lot. I say to people all the time, I'm a fan just like everyone else. I consume media. That's my gig. I like to watch a shitload of YouTube videos. I like to listen to all the podcasts. I like to read everyone's comments on the subreddit and the official forums, not so much, more the subreddit. But I get out there and I see all this stuff, and I can tell you this much. From everything I've gathered over the last, 15 months that I've been doing the show, it really does seem that the majority of people, I think it's fair to say, have dubbed you their favorite Classic WoW YouTuber. Now, have you taken notice of that? And, do you see the comments? Do you go out and spot what people are saying about you? And how do you feel about the love that has been shown towards your channel?
Oh, I feel great about that. You see, the thing is that I was watching my very first video that I made. It was basically a scuffed video where I didn't even speak proper English and so on. And the thing is that all the people are saying that I have very good content, but I don't really see it as that good, and I don't really consider myself as a good creator. I would say I'm average. I'm trying a lot, and when people come and say, wow, Frost, this is so great, I cannot really take that fully, and yeah.
I appreciate where you're coming from, and let me say that just hearing you then, that's part of the reason I think why people have come to like your work, is that, your humble nature, your likable nature, your relaxed nature. I enjoy the shit out of your videos. I can tell you that much, mate. And I've watched many, many of them. And it's part of that relaxed vibe and not so much in your face attitude. And just, here's some information. I will present it to you as I am, that I think people really, really enjoy and can relate to you with. So, it's even here, I can hear it in the humbleness and the meekness. I appreciate where you're coming from. But anyway, I'll blow by that. So it's good to know that you do see the comments and you realize what people do think of you. And it's funny that even though you might not think you might think you're average, I can tell you that I think, and many other people think, you're much more than that. So let me move on to this. And one funny little thing I do feel the need to touch on, and please appreciate this, Frost. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and I say it with all the love and affection in the world. As someone with what a lot of people deem to be a owner of a funny accent, I feel the need to talk about your accent for a second. And,
where in the world are you from? And can you tell me what the funniest interaction you've had with people over your accent may have been, and the now beloved pronunciation of the word WoW as to you, vanilla WoW?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I'm from Romania. I'm 32 years old, and I've been traveling a lot through Europe. Now, when I started playing World of Warcraft, I didn't really know English. I think most of my English was learned from Cartoon Network. In Romania, we had Cartoon Network, but without subtitles, or it was straight English, just like you had it in NA probably. And I kind of understood the English language, but I never was able to pronounce it or have a casual conversation until World of Warcraft came. I played in a couple of guilds and English was a requirement. I still remember some pretty weird situations where I was in a ZG group in Vanilla, and I couldn't explain to the raid leader, why is he taking the bijoux from ZG? I want them. Why do you take them? And I couldn't communicate that. And that was so stressful for me because I wanted the bijoux. I didn't know what they were doing, but why is he taking them? Apparently they were taking them to the guild bank and so on. And this was really weird. And then when I came in my 20s, I traveled around Europe. I've been to Jersey, Channel Islands, UK, Amsterdam. I lived for 5 years in Ireland with my girlfriend, with Sonia. And it started to grow on me. Like, I guess I'm pretty fluent now. And some of the weird interactions, as you asked, I think I was, when I was living in Ireland, I did a lot of things there. I had a coffee shop. I worked as a chef. I worked as a kitchen porter. And I busked on the streets. I was blowing giant soap bubbles for kids, and selling bubble solutions.
Yeah.
And someone came to us to get an interview for a radio, and it was live on radio. And we were like, what? He asked us, what are you guys doing here? And we are like, we're making bubbles for human beings or something. And then we said, so the people don't complain that you make those giant bubbles and make soap on the streets and so on. And we were like, well, we try not to derange people. And as we was trying to say, well, I guess it was more emotions and so on for being live on radio. But basically, yeah, that's the background story. A lot of travel through Europe and the necessity to learn English for playing the game properly, I guess, as a community.
Okay. Can you think of any particular comments on your videos or anything, or do you have a bit of fun now with the whole vanilla WoW thing?
Oh yeah, the WoW stuff. You see, Romanian language, most people think it's a Slav country, it's situated in the eastern part of Europe, but we're actually one of the 5 Latin languages of Europe. And basically we're Romans combined with Dacians and so on. And I grew up pronouncing WoW. Whoa, that's how we say it in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. And it's very hard to unlearn something opposed to learning something new, especially when you're an old dog. And some of the weird comments, I think I can say this. Some guy said on my YouTube channel, take out that dildo from your mouth when you're recording or something like that. Actually, that was very funny.
Very good. Oh,
that's the one I remember because it was creative. I mean, I couldn't hate on the guy. I was like, holy shit, that's good.
Oh, how funny. All right. Well, mates, I just want to, one last thing before we get into the nitty gritty of the game. In your videos, a lot of people will notice the one common denominator, at least it sticks out to me, is your UI. It's really crisp. And, I laugh with the UI things because it's kind of like people passing each other in the street and they take notice of each other's clothes and they're like, wow, you look fantastic. Where'd you get that? Who are you wearing? So if I can just ask, what is your UI and what can you tell us about it? I just think it's so meticulous.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I think I have a bit of an OCD when it comes to making something suited for yourself. I mean, created for yourself. And I always try to pick the best add-ons and try to make them to a point where I really enjoy them. Now, my UI is a combination of a mod called Mod UI. It's an entire interface that blackens your unit frames and your bags and so on. And I have an elite player frame, just like you have on a mob. It appears on those 2 add-ons. And basically, that's it. A couple of more add-ons like swing timers, attack bar, and so on. And cooldowns. There's another one called cooldowns. The reason why I'm not talking that much about them is because the private server 1.12 add-ons are so buggy that if someone gets into them, even if I give them exactly the WTF folder and so on, they're very hard to set up because they're not working like the modern add-ons. And it's very hard. You have to know a lot of commands, like for every add-on, how to move them, how to do them, and so on. And another thing is that they won't work for Classic WoW unless someone starts developing them. As Classic WoW will have a different engine running, and you will need like Legion add-ons. I'm pretty sure the add-on developers already started working on them. But if someone wants my UI or something similar, the reason why the game looks more crisp is because of the mod UI, that whole interface. Now, if you have mod UI and move anything, those two add-ons, you can make it look basically like mine. Everything else on my UI, it's extra, like the cooldowns, the attack timers. So you have to work with these two, because mod UI will make your game, your video graphics look more crisper and so on. It's a very great add-on, and I hope they will develop it for Classic, because I just want to have it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a silly little thing that I'm sort of a stickler for as well is I love the font that's used in your UI, which is an odd thing to pick out, but I absolutely love it.
The fonts are called Prototype.
Ah, okay. I'll have to.
I juggle with a couple of fonts. I think it's PT Sans Narrow Bold and Prototype. Those are my two favorite. PT Sans Narrow Bold is also used by the ELV UI. It's small, compact, and more things can fit into a small chat. So I really, really enjoy that thing.
Oh, I'll have to pick your brain later for that setup. But yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for touching on that. Well, look, Frost, let's now get into, let's stop sort of, we've flirted with each other enough. Let's get into, the core of this conversation, which is going to be what is the basis of your movies, your knowledge of WoW. And obviously you talk so much about the economy, which is something that really sings out to my heart, but you do it from a little bit of a different angle than other people who are speaking about WoW, and I really do appreciate that. But I'll just start with this generally. What made you fall in love so much with the economy and the theory behind making gold in the game?
Well, I guess it's mostly because when I was playing back in 2005 or back then, I didn't really have that much gold. I was always struggling. Of course, I had my epic mount. I had all my enchants done on my hunter and so on, but I didn't really get into it. So after Vanilla passed, I went to Burning Crusade with a bittersweet taste because I haven't finished all the vanilla content. And I kept coming back to the game, to Vanilla WoW. And each time I was coming back, I was playing a different class, and I was trying things that I didn't try back in Vanilla, like making gold. In one server that I played, I think I made like 15,000 gold just from doing various stuff, playing the auction house, doing grinding spots, buying and selling expensive recipes, and so on. So the more I did, the more I figured out that I enjoy grinding. And I think everything changed when I played Black Desert Online. That is one of the most grindiest games I ever played in my game. And the thing with grinding is that first you hate it, then you become accustomed to it, and then it's a way of playing, It's so weird to move from hating to do one thing to actually enjoying it. It's the same thing when I had a job like being a dishwasher to a big hotel, and washing dishes in the morning after breakfast for 400 people was so annoying, so hateful, so much hate. But then I started getting into it. I was like, oh, everything needs to be clean and it's done by me and I can arrange them like this. And it's a similar, I wanted to make a metaphor here. I'm not sure if it went well, but yeah.
No. I totally understand what you're saying. It's something that personally I haven't done as much, the grind, in terms of if I want gold, I'm going to go out and grind some mobs. Like, that was never something that I signed up for. I was someone who just played the auction house. All I did was live on the auction house. I flipped things for hours at a time. I loved it. It was the game within the game for me. And that's how I made my small fortune in vanilla. And,
exactly.
I lived a very comfortable life in vanilla because of that. So I'm actually, look, of course I want to be rich again when Classic comes out, but I'm also somewhat titillated by the thought of going through the game broke and understanding, you know, all the plight of, I couldn't afford this, I couldn't afford that, I have to go out and work for my gold. I was just through dumb luck fell into a server where I could apply my skills, and they're not really any skills that nobody else can have. Like, anybody can do this. And so I think it'll be great to go through your videos, and if I am struggling flipping the auction house because every man and his dog will be doing it this time around, at least now I'm armed with some information of, all right, let's go out and get gold the old school way by just flat out grinding. And obviously vanilla affords that opportunity to any player. But one thing I was wondering with you is, you know, the amount of videos that you've done on grinding, do you feel like you're giving away your spots a little bit? Like, what if Classic drops and there are people on your server, you know, let's say you trundle out for the day to go do your grind and you know all your secret spots and you go, this is going to be great, I'm going to sit here for a couple of hours and earn, you know, 150, 200 gold. And then there's like a handful of people sitting there doing the exact same thing who have all watched your guides. Do you worry that like you're blowing up your own spot a little bit?
Well, I'm not worried about that. Because what people seem to not understand is that vanilla, the world is so vast. You know that it actually takes 1 hour to walk from the southern part of a map to the northern part. I think it's 1 hour and 7 minutes for Kalimdor and about like 1 hour for Eastern.
Yeah, I think it's like 53 minutes on one. And yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And the world is so vast, and every single spot has huge potential. It depends on the set of tools that you have with you, the professions you have, the patience you have, and so on. Not only the outside spots are for potential money. There are dungeons, lower level dungeons, and people are afraid because they got used. I think the private server community are complaining about this because they got used on playing us on a server with 10,000 players. I don't believe Blizzard will have a cap on a server with 10,000 players, maybe 5,000, let's say. I'm guessing here. I'm doing my best guess. And there's no way in hell at every hour and every day that the spot will be filled. It's almost impossible. And if you really want to make gold in vanilla, there's so many resources. If something doesn't work, if that's spots that you enjoy with Felclot, let's say, for example, you can always move to a spot, I don't know, kill grizzlies in Felwood. They drop lots of grays, junk, and they're filled. You can go in Silatus, the spot can host like 5 players at the same time, killing spiders and scorpions. And all these spots will make you 30 golds minimum per hour. Let's say you're fresh level 60, 30 gold minimum per hour. If you have maybe herbalism or skinning and so on, you can boost it by 10 to 20 gold. It's a matter of how much you're willing to effort to put into it. Now, another thing, I think I forgot to say this earlier, about grinding. Some people might not enjoy it or might feel like they're doing something, forcing themselves to do something. But in order to make grinding enjoyable, I think setting a goal, it's a great thing. Let's say you want to grind for 1 hour. You do it today, you finish the hour of grind, you're done. You see how much gold you made, 20, 30 gold, and tomorrow maybe you make another goal to grind for another hour, and maybe you can see if you can beat your old record. Or setting up goals is very important, especially for players that are casual and don't have that much time. And I think it can help a lot. So to sum it up, I don't think by showing the spots, I mean, already I've showed like 20 spots. Imagine 3,000 players on a server. Half of them are doing level 60 stuff, dungeons and so on. Half of them are leveling. And maybe there's, let's say 500 that are actually grinding. 500 players divided by hundreds of spots, it's doable. Yeah.
In hearing you answer that one, it just got me wondering, like, do you feel that there's a lot of principles in real life that apply to Azeroth in a way, in terms of, you know, the economy and trying to earn money and save money and planning on where to get your money? Do you feel like, you know, failing to plan is planning to fail, in that the average adventurer, let's say the average person who plays classic World of Warcraft, who hasn't done all this research, they don't watch all the videos, they don't know all the information, they just go, well, I need some money, I'm just going to go out and kill stuff. And they just walk out the front door and just kill the first few mobs in front of them for an hour and take home whatever they get. And then, do you think that there's a fine line between planning a budget, figuring out what things are worth, and knowing where to go will obviously take you so far ahead of the field versus the average traveler who just grinds anywhere, or there's not that huge of a difference?
I think there's a difference, and you have a very good point there, because knowledge is power, right? And having knowledge about the places you grind or the things you do will increase your gold gains dramatically. And even in real life, if you have knowledge about something, you will be able to, in a form or another, to monetize it, right? So, one piece of advice for new players or players that are returning to the game, if you're going to test a new spot, to grind a spot, you can look up the mob. Now, there are a lot of websites there. You can go and you can check their loot tables. Like, if they have gray items, that can be sold to vendor. If they're beast, that can be skinned. Check where the location is. If the location, let's say it's in Searing Gorge, maybe you can use mining or herbalism to pick herbs. Check if they drop rare white materials, trade materials that you can sell on the auction house, and then go on your server's auction house and see how much they're worth. So I guess knowledge is not really required, opposed to a bit of research prior to getting into a new spot or trying to figure out a new way to make gold. You can easily get the knowledge from a spot in less than 5 minutes, everything you need to know. And I'm not sure if I understood your question okay last time. Are you asking me if there's ways that the things you do in game can help you in real life?
Yeah, so that was sort of the first part of the question in terms of like,
okay.
Do you operate with a daily or weekly budget? Don't blow all your money on stupid things. Do you kind of have goals in terms of, I want to bank this much gold this week? And, the way that we might do it in real life, I think obviously that those same principles will get you very far. I mean, it seems to be the case that it probably would. That will get you far ahead in Azeroth.
No, I don't have any goals. Like, when I'm leveling, to give you an example, I leveled like 1 year ago a warrior on, I think it was Northdale Fresh, a private server. And by the time I was level 34, I had 180 something gold after I spent buying the best gear I can for warrior from the auction house. So I purchased the best available gear from the auction house. Things like the bow from Uldaman for level 36. I had it in my back. All the blue gear and so on. And I had around 180 gold. And I kept purchasing items for level 44, like the plate boots with strength and agility. I purchased one of these swords with 3 hit as a warrior. I didn't want my whirlwind axe. I wanted that sword with 3 hit. I don't know why. I was testing something. And I still managed to have gold. So to answer your question, I don't really go cheap when I'm playing. Especially when I'm playing a warrior. I like to invest in stuff in the auction house, opposed to the popular opinion, like, don't buy stuff from the auction house. Oh, come on. I really want to enjoy playing the warrior. I don't want to do a corpse run every 5 minutes. I want to feel like I'm killing enemies, and I'm going to invest money, even in enchants and so on. When I'm leveling, I'm investing money in beast slaying enchants or stamina enchants or strength or offensive things and so on. So to be honest, no, I don't think I ever saved money. Because, for example, I leveled another rogue to 16. By the time I was 60, I had like 500 and something gold. So it only took me a couple of days to get my epic mount after that.
You raise an interesting point there, because one thing I'd love to ask you is, I mean, I have a relatively controversial opinion on this one, on what should not be a controversial topic, but it comes up every now and again when people talk about, the purchasing of greens off the auction house during the leveling experience. And, the school of thought is, don't ever buy a green. You do not need it. You get your quest rewards. The gear you get is fine. You'll be okay. Just, go through what you're given and don't waste your money. You are saving up for mounts, and every gold counts. And I've always sort of been like, well, and particularly, given that you've leveled warriors as well, and warriors being so gear dependent, a few greens through the leveling process can be an absolute game changer. But I've always been like, you know what? I do buy greens at times if I can clearly afford it. If I'm happy with where my bottom line is at, let's say I'm, level 22 and I know kind of what I need, where I need to be at level 40 and level 60 for my gold for my mount, I'll kind of take a little bit of a projection and go, well, I'm earning X amount of gold. I think I'll earn X amount of gold more in a few levels time when more goods are coming in. I think I'm good to buy a green or two. What's your general thought on that?
Well, I really got used over the years. I think that the World of Warcraft leveling journey 1 to 60, it's like the hero's journey. You start as a noob, as no one, and then you slowly get progression every level until 60. Even after 60, it's like this journey of becoming a man, a powerful, important person. But at the end, you're still no one. But that doesn't matter. It feels like you're becoming something. So I really got used. Each time I'm going to Stormwind or Orgrimmar or to train spells and so on, I always check the auction house. Now, I don't know how. I always have money as well. Like, it happens, I think you put a thought in the universe. Maybe I'm giving bad advice here. If you cannot save money and you don't have enough, don't purchase everything from the auction house. But I get satisfaction from purchasing a green item when I go to the auction house. If I go at level 6 and I find a level 6 training green sword two-hander, I'm going to purchase it and I'm going to be happy about it. Even if I pay 1 gold for it, I don't care. And it's the same with my mage. If I find something of the eagle with 10 stamina and 10 intellect while I'm leveling, holy shit, that's good. It's stamina, it's intellect. It's going to keep me grinding more. It's going to help me not to die. I'm going to be able to make more gold and so on. So I get this feeling of progression with each new upgrade I get. Even if I'm going to change it in 3 levels, maybe that's not, but that's just how I enjoy to play the game. Of course, some people might have just enough gear. Okay, I can clear every mob with this, so that's fine as well. But I really enjoy that process.
It's interesting to hear that, and it made me think something that you just said, where, we've had so many people on the show before and in other places talking about the small wins that the game affords you in all these corners of the content that we go through. And that's why how I've always sort of approached it is when I'm leveling a character, if it's, again, A, within the budget and I'm doing okay money-wise, and B, I usually spot a bargain. And like you say, I like to pay between half a gold to a gold for something, and you'll spot bargains all the time. But it's no different from being out shopping and wanting to reward yourself. It's like, you know what? I busted my fucking ass for this gold and I'm going to, buy myself a little something, and that green is going to look great on me and you feel good when you equip it. And I just think it's a small little win that feels good as opposed to lying out a hard and fast rule where I will never purchase a item off the auction house that I can equip because money is tight. Then you're really robbing yourself of those small little victories outside of the quest rewards. I don't know. I know a lot of people will be against me on this, but that's just something that I've always taken the time and money out for. So I'm always going to remain happy with it.
Exactly. Like I keep saying on my videos, there's no correct path of playing vanilla. The only correct path is the one you enjoy. So if you're waiting for someone else to go like, this is how you should play the game. Yes, some of them have very good points, but you have to do what you enjoy. And like you said, I think for me, at least, the purchasing items from the auction house, a good deal. Like you said, I'm not going to pay like 5 to 10 golds for a sword or a blue item. If you find a decent green that it's a significant upgrade for the price of 50 silver to 1 gold, why not take it? I mean, give yourself a treat, It's like following it. You're not going to the extreme where you're not spending anything. You're not even buying spells that you might need and you don't know because someone told you that you don't need flair for a hunter or, but you're taking a middle way, a balanced way. Don't spend too much, but do not spend anything. I mean, it's a bit too much.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I feel like it's a blessing from a voice that I trust. So that's great. And as listener Cheesy's Yum is piping up in Twitch chat, and it's a very sobering comment, and I think it's fantastic. Buy whatever you want. It's a video game, and I completely agree with you. So
exactly,
yes.
It's just a game. Why you take it so serious?
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, let's move on. And just coming back to something I mentioned before, and I talked about you giving away the grinding spots and these great, amazing spots on your videos. Have you had any fun comments from people saying, Frost, shut up, stop giving away my spots?
Oh yeah, every video. Every video, but they're like only 1% of them, like it's, oh my God, you gave my last good spot, Frost. What did you do? And even some of the bad ones, I don't know if I can use those words on Twitch, but yeah, you get them. Not that often, but one per video at least.
Fair enough. Swear away on this show, mate. Generally, if it's a fuck or a shit, it's fine, so don't worry about it. But, mate, I'll move on to this. After all the movies that you've done, I wanted to go through some of your personal favorite spots and recommendations. If I were to sort of put you on the hot seat now and say, you've covered a lot of spots in your content. What are your top 3 grinding spots? If you were, really busting for cash, where is it that you would like to go to and why?
Okay. So I'm going to tell you top 3 for while leveling and top 3 for high-end spots. Okay.
Sure. So
for leveling, my very first spot, it's around level 20-something, 22 to 26 in wetlands. The small red dragonkins from a Redo the Onyxia quest. They drop the small flame sack, a couple of greens, and large claws. There's a lot of materials around there. And for level 17, it's a great spot. Unfortunately, it won't work that well on a fresh server. When this economy of the server gets a bit mature, the flame sacks will sell well. So that's one of my favorite spots. It's more suited for Alliance, but no worries. For Horde, there's 1,000 needles. There's a cave filled with centaurs. They drop more greys than your average mobs. Grey weapons, grey armor, and so on. Wool cloth, silk cloth, silver. And if you spend a couple of hours there, let's say you're stuck and you don't know where to go to level, you can make a full bag of greys and so on. And at level 20, you can feel that because a sword maybe sells for 30 to 40 silver. If you have a full bag of greys and stuff, you can make like 5 to 10 golds if you spend a couple of hours there, 1 or 2. And early game, it's very valuable. And my third favorite spot for leveling, it's Swamp of Sorrows, the Jaguars, or Stranglethorn, the Panthers and Tigers, as they drop the grey items that have high value and they have a very good drop chance. I think you can make at low levels maybe 15 golds, 10 to 15 golds per hour if you try hard. And for the high-end spots, I would say that one of my favorite spots is grinding elemental waters in Eastern Plaguelands. The 3 lakes, there's one to the south, one in the center, and one to the north. The one near Corry Crossing, the drop chance of elemental water is a bit lower. The middle one is one of the best. And I go there when the price of the essence of water is at its highest, especially after people reach 60 because they need to craft their robe of the Archmages, which needs like 10, and a variety of other items that require essence of water, and they tend to get pretty expensive. Also, when Naxxramas is released, essence of water will be required to craft resistance gear and so on. And I always check the market and see what it's worth to be grinded. Anyone can do that. You just have to check the prices on the auction house. If something feels very expensive to you, find out where you can grind it. And that's the thing with grinding spots. Not every spot will work at every point in the game. Check the prices and, this was my first favorite spot. So the elemental waters in Eastern Plaguelands. The second I would say will be the Twilight humanoids in Silithus. But this is only when AQ40 comes. You need to farm the Twilight text. And they tend to drop a lot of rare items and even epics because they're level high enough to drop the higher tiers of the items. That the world epic items are in tiers. They're level 58 epic items, they're level 51, they're level 39 and so on, 36. So in order for a mob to drop an epic item, it has to be 2 or 3 levels above the level of the epic item. For example, if you go into Zul'Farrak, I'm not getting to that. So that's my favorite spot. And my third grinding spot, my favorite spot would be probably Ajara, Ajara, the Satyr grind for Felcloth. That's one of my favorites as well.
Okay.
There's so much diversity there, and yeah.
Okay. Well, Listener Gigantor raises a good point, and something I've honestly wondered as well. Through all these moments where you talk about these grinding spots, and after everything that you've just mentioned there, and that was a fantastic answer, but through all this time, is there a spot that you've never made mention of, nor will you ever make mention of, because you want to keep it just for yourself? Just that one little spot that's amazing.
No.
Okay.
And I think by the time Classic will be released, I'm going to cover probably all of the spots. Maybe I'm not aware of some, like people might think that I'm keeping it secret, but no. It's information. I mean, I don't see it as something bad sharing it. And I can see how someone else see it, right? Mm-hmm. Even if I share the information and let's say I'm playing Alliance and Horde will come and gank me, we'll just make the game more interesting, right? I can call my friends and we can have a fight and over the spot and so on. No, I never try to hide any spot.
All right.
I'm going to be a streamer anyway. You cannot really hide stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, that's interesting to hear that you're going to stream it. That's fantastic. Now, mate, are there any items that you can think of that the regular player might dismiss as being, there's nothing to that item, I'll just vendor it, or, I'll throw it away or whatever, that you would say is far more valuable than meets the eye? What are some items that you think you put a bit more value into than the regular player might?
Well, a couple of items that have value are the twink items. Now, when a server is fresh, the twinking community is not really established yet. So a variety of items like Shadow Fang, Assassination Blade, maybe even items from Scarlet Monastery like the blade from there, the Scarlet Shoes, Pendulum of Doom will not value that much at the beginning. But once the economy of the server establishes, they will start rising in price. So let's say a Shadow Fang can be at a value of 9 gold in the early days of a fresh server, and maybe after 6 months can jump up to 100 or 200 gold out of nowhere. Same goes for the Pendulum of Doom. In the beginning, it can be even under 100 gold, and then after 6 months can jump up to 400 gold. These are a couple of items to keep an eye out on. And not even that, some items are green, like level 19 Bracers of the Monkey with 4 agility and 4 stamina. They're best in slot for twinks. They will sell for like 10 to 20 gold sometimes and so on. Another thing, another thing to keep in consideration are the recipes. So many recipes that are rare and people are not aware of it. Things like Shadow Reflector in Scarlet Side in Stratholme. Drops from the Crimson Battle Mage, I think, with a very low drop chance. It's a really valuable recipe. Can be sold for hundreds of gold because the engineer who has the recipe will be able to charge great fees for it. Another recipe could be from Deadwind Pass from the Ogres, the 9 strength on bracers. Doesn't seem like much, but it can sell for 100 to 200 golds early game because it's one of the best enchants for the bracers slot, right? And people will need to go to one certain enchanter to pay fees to make that enchant. Crusader enchant, life stealing from Skullomance. I think there are too many of them to actually make a list here. But as a general advice, if you see it, if something drops, ask your guildmates. Someone must know if it has any value. There's no way, because people will try to scam you out of your stuff. If you find an epic item, let's say a Crawlblade, and you don't know the value of it, you will probably try to sell it on the general chat or auction house first. And people will whisper you and try to offer you, here, take 50 gold for it. And the value of it might be 300 to 400 gold. So yeah, there are a couple of things to keep an eye out. Out of the top of my mind, these are some, but there are more of them.
Well, to steal perhaps a term of yours, or a term that should be applied to you in your videos, or if you do, in instances like that, absolutely, you've got to, if people are going to come after you and start throwing offers at you, it's, stay frosty. You've got to have your wits about you before you start selling things.
Well, it happened once. I think the Edgemaster gauntlets dropped in a Blackrock Depths group. You know the Edgemats. the ones with the skill, 7 skill on all weapons. They're very expensive. They can go up to 1,000 gold on a fresh server because they're best in slot for warriors up to PVL, maybe AQ40. Some people say it's for the whole content of vanilla. I'm not sure about this, but they're very expensive. That's one thing for sure. And it dropped and everyone rolled greed. And some priest won it. And then the guy from the party offered him 50 golds for them. And he was like, wow, 50 golds. That's great. Here, take them. And it happened. It can happen.
Now, a relatively similar question, but can you think of any items that stand out to you that you feel when you balance the amount of effort it takes to get them versus the price that you can sell them for on the auction house, what do you put or list as your go-to items when you want to get maximum turnaround, if you will, in terms of, I know if I put this many hours into this item, the gain could be absolutely astronomical. Or, even if something that's really, really easy to get, but with a relatively minor gain, but you can do it over and over and over again. Effort versus profit, what items do you think are the best?
Well, like we previously said, items that have a high value at a certain time. Like I said, the economy changes. So it could be anything from early game, you could farm lower Blackrock Spire with friends for a variety of rare drops. The Arcanite Reaper, you can get it from a rare and lower Blackrock Spire. The Mage recipe for Robe of the Archmage, and if it's going to be in its 1.12 state, it's going to be able to sell it on the auction house. There are already 2 items there. Another item should be the Fire Protection Potion recipe. So early game, those will have high values. You can go there with 2-3 friends. It can be doable to farm it in 3 friends, the first boss and repeat, clear and rinse and repeat. That's one thing to go. Whenever new content is released, like we said on the Silithus spot, that would be the greatest spot to farm at that point. Probably you can make even 70 to 80 gold per hour if you grind fast, because everything will be needed. The Twilight text, the stupid green things that makes you summon bosses, the costumes and so on, they will sell at the auction house for 30 to 40 silver maybe, and the text for people to get reputation. So you always have to move with the trend. It's not what you want, it's what the market demands. And it's very easy to check that out. Other items I would go to. Early game, even Righteous Orbs from Strat Scarlet could sell good. As a healer, you could go in Schoolomance for the Dark Runes, and sell them, a way to make money. You go and heal Schoolomance runes and you take the runes for yourself. And if you don't use them in a raid, you can sell them on the auction house. Guilds that do progression will buy them. Early game, the Felcloth spot could go well. So you have to check the market.
What do you feel about, and this is something that I'm guilty of, listener Gigantor asks again, Frost, what are your views on people who personally work at trying to reduce auction house values by continuously undercutting? Now, I'm guilty of this. I, work like a dog on the auction house, and I will do what it takes to basically get rid of an item. And I spoke on the show about this a long time ago now with a listener, Party Pooper, and we sort of were both of the opinion, like, always be the cheapest. Just get rid of that item. Just whatever it takes, just be the cheapest and get rid of it. I don't sort of look at it from a particularly malicious viewpoint where I'm not drastically reducing my price to get rid of it. I always just do, like, I'm the dickhead who goes a few silver less than the last one just to get rid of it. But what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't like when people undercut too much. Yes. I'm okay with people undercutting, let's say, a silver or so on. Yeah. I'm okay.
I agree.
So I come today, I always undercut like only 1 copper. Like, I want my items to be there first.
Yeah.
But after I post them, there's a high chance that a guy will come and post 4 pages of Runecloth. And I hate that. Okay, undercut me, but don't post week of grind of Runecloth, because we need to sell. You need to sell. So when he does that, he ruins the market.
Mm-hmm.
What I do, I don't remove them from the auction house, never, because you pay a fee and so on. Maybe they sell until the end. But I put them once. I put them twice. If the third time doesn't sell, I just vendor them. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what I have. Like, of course, I'm not going to vendor epic items and so on. If it's leather or something, try once, or a green item that I think has a value and can be sold on the auction house. Like I said, I always undercut just a slight, and it's normal to undercut. But you have to be careful because sometimes you try to undercut and there are only like 5 or 10 items available on that. Let's say mana potions. They're sold for 2 gold 50 each. And then the next one is sold for 345. Then I don't undercut. I check the number of items that are listed on the market and I try to figure out how fast they would sell. And if not, I sell them for 349 for the next. So it's overcut, or how would you call that?
Yeah.
Or if I don't like the price of the items I want to sell in one day, and if they're not that many, I just keep them in the bank and you wait for peak time or weekends. Now, during peak time and weekends, everyone logs in. Everyone needs to craft their stuff. Everyone has needs for consumables and so on. And the demand on the market will be higher. People will not, will buy out everything. Cloth, leather, herbs, potions. That's the best time to sell things on the market. And maybe the people that are usually selling are busy and they don't have time to list, and you can sell yours maybe 20 to 30% more expensive that you would sell them, let's say, on a normal Monday morning.
I'm completely with you. It really gives me the shits when people put on pages and pages of the one item as well. So I appreciate where you're coming from, but that's really interesting to hear. I'm glad we're somewhat in agreement there.
That's why I don't go to the same spot always. This is a very good point you made here, because if you go to the same spot always, you'll always have the same things to sell in the auction house, the same materials every day. Of course, you can get rune cloth that will always sell. But if you change spots, if you have a diversity, a variety of places to go to, every time you'll have different things to sell in the auction house. So you won't end up putting 20 pages of one thing on the auction house. And you made a very good point there. I hate it as well.
Now, I've been interested, Frost, in all the grinding that you've done, and you grind and grind away and you showcase it so well in your videos. What are some of the more memorable, rarer BOE epics that you've personally come across, and how did you react?
Well, I'm not one of the lucky guys that get a lot of rares and epics. I did remember a couple of them. I keep in mind that I played a lot of vanilla, like a lot. And one of my first epics was the Kang of Decapitator, level 44 axe, with a quite decent value on the auction house, probably 300 to 400 gold. I sold it back then. And I was questing with a group through Jinta Allure, I think, in Hitterlands, the Troll Quest Elite ones. And it dropped. And we made a decision as a group, everyone rolls need, and whoever wins it, wins it. And I won it. I was so happy. That was my first. And one of the Trollblade, I got a Trollblade from the Lumberjacks in Heartglen, Western Plaguelands. And my reaction was like, I couldn't believe it. I linked it in the guild chat and people were like, holy shit, nice. Yeah, but other than that, I don't really get that many epics. I see a lot of people getting them around me. It feels sometimes like it's a conspiracy. Dude, look at how many hours I have playing this game and I don't get as many as you guys do.
Well, now in hearing that, Frost, is there any one particular item or a few items that you really covet for Classic and something that you're really, really gunning for?
Does it have to be items that are valuable?
No,
really
whatever you like.
I really want to go for the Death Charger Reigns from Stratholme.
Okay.
Especially if I'm going to play a human warrior. I'm not sure about this yet, but I would really want to get that. That seems to be one of the most rare items in game. Of course, the Runed Blade of Baron Rivendell, if I get it early game as a human, it's pretty good with a sword skill on humans. Those are two items that I want to get. And in terms of items for selling, I think I would like to get my hands on some of the rare recipes for professions. Now, no matter what profession you choose, each profession has some of their best recipes. If you're a leather worker, for example, you can get the core armor kit from Molten Core and charge fees to give tanks defense cap, right? If you're an engineer, you can get the Shadow Reflector or the Fire Reflector recipes and charge fees for getting making people those trinkets. If you're, a blacksmith, you want to get for Lionheart help. And these will help you, you'll get your money back, or if you win it, it's even better. You'll just simply make money. Yeah, these are a couple of items. Depends on what profession I will choose because I'm not sure yet.
All right. Well, I'm actually so glad that you started to touch on professions there, because that was literally my next question in terms of, I sort of feel like professions get left by the wayside a little bit in content creation in general. I can tell you that Countdown to Classic has not spent a lot of time on professions at all. I've barely touched on it. I've been meaning to, but I don't get a lot of people coming forward saying, hey, Josh, I am an expert in profession Y. Let's talk about it. Let's go cooking. Let's go fishing. I mean, I have had people approach me, but it's not a lot of them. You seem to absolutely love professions, and I know the professions are great in WoW, and I love them too, but how important was it to you to highlight professions and give tips to people in the way that you have?
Well, professions are a big part of vanilla. Everyone needs things that are made with profession. That's a fact. Some profession help you, like tailoring will get you like the robe of power, a BOP robe that it's pretty okay for a leveling. At level 60, you have the robe of the Archmage or True Fate vestments. Then when ZG comes, you'll have the Bloodvine set. Some of them help you gain power, right? But some of them are actually good for making money. Now, like we said, you're not going to be making a lot of money while leveling, because it takes a lot of investment in order to get professions to 300 skill, but you set the smooth path for making money at level 60. Now, even there are a variety of ways to make gold with the professions. To give you some example, leatherworking. You could craft things with thick leather. You purchase thick leather from the auction house. You craft things and then you vendor them for a higher value than the leather you purchase. If you manage to buy the thick leather with 1 gold 20, and then you create Nightscape chest, I think that's the one, you will be able to make, depends on the value you pay for silver, anywhere from 5 to 10 golds per hour just by processing leather. Then at higher levels, you can make the Wicked Leather Headband. And if the price of Illusion Dust and Greater Eternal Essence are pretty high on the auction house, you can just make, with rugged leather, you can make Wicked Leather Helmet, disenchant them, and sell the mats on the auction house for even high profits if the prices of the enchanting mats are there. Other things with other professions are more reliable on rare recipes. Like I said, engineering and blacksmithing and so on. But my approach on professions, don't expect to get really rich with them unless you have that rare recipes. Professions are more like part of the community. You help your guild. You help your friends. If you have tailoring, you want to make some bags for your friends. You want to make some bags for yourself. You're not going to make a lot of money. You have these 48-hour cooldowns like Mooncloth or Arcanite Bar and so on. These can make you a passive income, but professions are not really the best money makers. There are times in game, like with leatherworking and skinning, you could probably make the set from Ungoro with Devil Sour leather, the Devil Sour set. But then eventually it will die the market. There are opportunities, but I don't think it's the best way. Professions are more like to make a name for yourself and to help your guilds and friends.
Fair enough. Well, look, Frost, let's round this one out. I'm sure a lot of people are dying to know, what are your plans for Classic once it comes? You locked into being a mage again? Do you know what professions you're taking? Tell us all about what you're going to be doing.
Well, I'm obviously going to play on the EU servers on a PvP server, and I'm going to stream it. Holy shit, that's going to hurt. But that's just the way that it is. Now, in terms of classes, I'm not sure, but I kind of nailed it down. I could be either mage, undead mage, human warrior, or undead rogue. One of these 3 classes.
Okay.
Or maybe a night elf hunter. Jesus Christ.
No, I do the same thing, don't worry.
Anyway, maybe it will be a mage. My plans is to take 2 gathering professions and be on a rush to 60. I know professions will slow me a bit down, but I don't want to do the world first. I want to actually have my professions leveled at level 60.
Right.
My initial plan was to make a guild, but I have doubts now because I will have to manage the stream. I will have to manage the YouTube channel, and managing a guild, it's just too much. I don't think I can. So I might just join a very popular guild PvE guild, or I would like a mixed one because I want to rank up at least to get the blue PvP set. Yeah, so I'm going to be on a rush to 60 as fast as I can without leaving professions behind, because I don't like to come back and then go through Duskwood and pick flowers and so on. My professions might be herbalism and mining, or herbalism and skinning. Could be skinning though, because it's easier to level. I'm going to try to get my pre-best and slot gear, do some PvP, and I don't know, I do everything in the game. There are no things in game that I really don't like or reject. I saw a couple of days ago a video about a guy who only likes mythic raiding, nothing else. And I was like, wow, I guess that's possible to like only raiding, but why not smell the other flowers? There's so many.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you, mate. Can I tell you, it warms my heart to hear someone such as yourself have the same conundrum that I've been doing over the last couple of months, where people say, so, what class are you going to play in Classic WoW? And you go, well, I really want to play a priest, but then I also like warlocks. I'm also considering hunter, and I'm also considering shaman, and maybe, rogue and warrior. And you just go, oh, fuck, I don't know what I'm doing. So
for me, the dilemma is more about which one I'm going to play first, because I'm eventually going to end up playing all of them, all slowly leveling them. My first, like I said, is going to be a rush. But my second and third characters, I'm going to take my time, like run every dungeon and so on, and do all the quests. And I love even the leveling process. I like it. It's pretty great.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And I can't wait to do it all again. And I'm sure you can't either. Frost, I might wind it up here, mate. We've been going for an hour. I don't want to keep you all night. But can I just say thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. It's been such a delight to talk to you. And you are every bit as lovely as I thought you'd be, in person. When I watch your videos, you get an idea of someone's personality, and you've been an absolute legend to deal with here today. You've been so easygoing, and I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. Please tell people again where they can find you online.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, Josh. I was a bit, not scared, a bit enthusiastic before I got in, but it turned out to be easier than I was expecting. I guess it's because of the host. Once again, you can find me at YouTube/Frostadamus and Twitch.tv/Frostadamus. Thank you very much for having me, Josh. I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you, Frost. And everyone, please do go and throw Frost a sub if for some reason you haven't already. He is absolutely a content creator that I recommend, and I watch a lot of his stuff. So, Frost, thanks, mate. We'll talk to you later. Hey everyone, this past week the show received a voicemail from a listener to be played on the show, and I just want everyone to know that if you have a point that you'd like to air on the show, please do PM it through to me on Discord, and if you keep it under 90 seconds and you make a hell of a point about something listeners would love to hear about, then I'll happily air it on the show, just like this one from listener RMG.
Hey guys, so I'm calling in about torrent hitboxes. It's been discussed. People know about it. It's definitely different than what people are used to on private server testing. But specifically in terms of the hunter and the warrior class. So obviously bigger hitbox, bigger melee range. Warriors, it just seems like a no-brainer. Really, really, really useful extra passive that Torrent get as warriors. Whenever you're being kited away, get that extra 2 yards. Could be the difference between getting in another swing or not, right? So, the biggest weakness, if you're looking at kiting for a warrior, seems to really, really be helpful. And again, Light's Hope did not have the torrent hitbox, so people, theory crafting these last few years really have not had that in the data set to make decisions. And the same goes for Hunter, just as equally impacted because of that extended range. The most impactful, meaningful times for Hunter is in short range situations. This means it's going to be harder to get away and get into your ranged auto attacks. So to me, it seems like maybe Warrior is strictly better on Torn, maybe even competing against Orc. But then Torn Hunter might just be the worst race for Hunters overall and completely in PvP.
Thanks so much for that, RMG. And RMG actually followed up this point with a short message afterwards where he said, a lot of people have the following counter-argument regarding warriors. Yeah, but it works both ways. They can hit you from further away too. To that I say that your increased utility is greater than the enemy's increased utility. Against any other melee class, you're still happy because you're a freaking warrior, aka the king of melee. Against a ranged class, 1, they already outrange your charge to put you in combat anyway, and 2, no one goes to the very edge of their casting range. When a mage freezes you, they don't walk 30 yards away to cast it, they walk just a little bit away. Sony, for example, thinks the melee range makes Tauren the best warrior class. And I just want to say thanks again to RMG for that great voicemail and notes. Please do send me more people, and I'd love to be able to put them on the show more frequently. But for now, let's get back to the calls. Hey everyone, the call you're about to hear is all about the recently concluded Game of Thrones. If you've not seen the show's finale, or any of the final season, or any of Game of Thrones in general, and you'd planned on watching it, then please do realize this call is full of spoilers about the final episode and the show in general. So please do take a moment now to pause as you've been warned, and you can check the timestamps for the next call in the episode and skip ahead if this is going to be a problem for you. For everyone else who's seen everything, then I really hope you enjoy the show going a little bit off the beaten path here. So let's get to it. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic call, and this is one that I have been busting to do over the last, well, at least the last 6 weeks, but sort of sometime before that as well. And it's a talk which some of you may be scratching your head slightly over, going, hey, Josh, buddy, this is a World of Warcraft Classic podcast, so we're getting a little bit off track here. But as we've done before on the show, I can assure you I will somehow find a way to relate it back to World of Warcraft Classic or World of Warcraft in general. And today we're talking Game of Thrones, and more importantly, Season 8 of Game of Thrones, the finale, how it all wound up and how we feel about the show in general, and what parallels there may be with the way in which World of Warcraft has been handled over the years. So, I have enlisted 5 rabid Game of Thrones fans who I couldn't be happier to talk to. They are absolutely busting to talk about this with all of you. And I'll go through them all one by one really quick. Quick hellos, everyone. Tim, how are you, mate? Welcome back. TianSG.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here, man. And one of our lovely mods, Surnami, how are you?
Hi, guys. I'm doing awesome. How are you?
Great. Good to have you here. And we've got 3 newcomers on this call, and you all know how much I love having first-time callers step into the fray. Let's go through them all one by one. Myph, how are you, mate?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for the invite.
My pleasure. And Feydark, how are you?
I'm doing good. How's it going?
Good, man. Good. And finally, Michaelbolt, how are you, man?
Yeah, I'm really good, mate. Just trying to hide my excitement.
I'm very, very excited about this one. I'll say real quickly about Michaelbolt. If you're on Discord, his avatar on Discord is naturally Michael Bolton, and he wrote me this epic message about trying to get in on this call, which I loved. And at the very end, he sealed the deal with his, basically his stating why he was so in love with the music and assorted works of Michael Bolton. And I was like, that man's in. He's in. If you go into Michael Bolton stuff, I'll get you in on the call. So well done on that. But everyone, look.
Oh my God, is Michael Bolton here?
I know, right?
That was great.
Guys, I couldn't be more excited to do this. Let's get started, and let's just talk generally about, before I get into the WoW stuff, and we are getting there, I can assure you everyone listening, but real quick, real generally, I want to run through all of you. And guys, it's a free-for-all, by the way, so don't feel like you've got to wait for me to address you before you speak. But I will, as per usual, direct traffic as best I can. Were you happy with the conclusion to Game of Thrones on TV? Tim, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, the ultimate thing is, after having a week to think about it, really, I mean, I'm fine with where things ended up overall, you know, where all the characters ended up. I think the manner in which we got there for most of them was pretty rough, and a little bit difficult at times. This has been hashed out all over, you know, podcasts and articles online, all that stuff. But yeah, so, and at the end of the day, it still was a gorgeous TV show. I mean, that episode, the 5th episode, which I'll just, by the way, just spoilers, anybody.
Oh, yes. Great point. Sorry. Full and complete spoilers for everything Game of Thrones in this call. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, the fifth episode of this season was stunning visually. The acting is incredible. So, there were definitely rough spots. I think overall, I'm almost a little happy it's over, but I think I'm mixed, basically.
Okay, Surnami, how about you? Real quick, overall thoughts now that it's over.
Such a hard thing to say. At first, I'm not upset with how it ended. It's just like you saying, like how they got there. It just was too fast. It wasn't anything bridging it, nothing to tell you like how they got from point A to point B. It was more like point A to point Z. Like, I'm like, what happened to the rest of it? I don't know. It's just kind of confusing. But, yeah, I mean, I get that they wanted to end it, but I feel like they should have fleshed out a little bit more of the story.
Yep, I agree with you there. Myph, how about you, man? Real quick summary of how your thoughts are now.
Well, yeah, I really liked it. I mean, I guess mainly the problem is that it was too short, but we all know that. I feel like if we got 10 episodes, it would have been completely differently received. And also, I think that overall it was good, like where things ended up. It's kind of the out of the show things, like the feeling that they're just trying to get onto their Star Wars project and all these kinds of extra things that influence the show when they really shouldn't. And to me, that's kind of the big.
Okay, Feydark, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Well, use the word happy. I don't think that's really the right word here. I'll go with satisfied. I don't think anybody is really supposed to be happy. If we were paying attention to Game of Thrones, we'd realize we're never supposed to be happy, but satisfied is good. I agree that it could have used another 4 episodes to really push that fall from grace that Daenerys had.
Absolutely. And finally, Michaelbolt, how about you? Yay or nay?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think once you go into it, you see the quotes from George R. R. Martin saying, like, I would have liked him to stick to the book. But I think, going into it, he hasn't finished the source material. They're going to do as best as they can. You sort of saw it starting to unravel the last couple of seasons where the writing was a bit weaker. But I think cinematography, nailed it. Music, nailed it. Acting, nailed it. Writing, didn't quite nail it. But I didn't really see an alternative aside from traveling back in time and letting him finish the source material in the first place and then doing the whole series, because he's never going to finish it in time.
Okay. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the points that have been quickly noted during those quick introductions and how you all feel about it. And I'm glad that some people, I didn't want to make this a dog pile of, screw Game of Thrones, they ruined it, blah, 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 which is the sentiment that has been rather pervasive online over the last few days. I do want to try and balance it out somewhat and have some positives and also some negatives talked about. And while, personally, I wasn't really happy with the way that season 8 was handled, I'll try and do as good a job as staying, sort of neutral or arguments for both sides as I can. But Tim, I'll come back to you. And we've already heard that first point about whether or not it was rushed. And we knew for a long time that this was going to be a truncated season episode-wise, and people will be screaming out, but Josh, they extended the episode length, so you basically got the same amount of a season just in fewer episodes. And I do appreciate that, but people still feel that the narrative was somewhat rushed, particularly given some of the character turns that we got in season 8. And people have already obviously highlighted Dany, and that's one of the big things for me that's rather universal. People are saying the descent into madness should have been a bit more of a dragged out extent rather than a turning on a dime, which is kind of what happened. I know they alluded to it somewhat in previous episodes, but not quite enough for me. I wanted a bit more. But Tim, in terms of rushing season 8, what other points do you feel were either moved through too quickly or just not even finished due to the truncated season?
Well, I mean, definitely the Night King stuff and the White Walkers. That was built up the entire show. The entire show starts with introductions to the White Walkers and also to the Direwolves, another thing that got just sort of thrown out. And it all ends in halfway through the season with one stab after one long, cool, but one battle episode. It just felt, and they were very clear. Weiss and Benioff were very clear that they felt like the central part, the most interesting part of the story was the Iron Throne and the political machinations. Sorry, I can't pronounce that word, but, and so they made a choice. It felt it was fun. I cheered. I jumped out of my chair cheering when Arya killed the Night King, but ultimately it does feel unsatisfying. A lot of the magical elements sort of went to the wayside. Tyrion basically had to become kind of an idiot so that they could just move the plot forward. There was a lot of things that got, another good example, I think this is a really good example, is from Jaime's story. So he gets with Brienne and then leaves her within a 10, 15-minute stretch in one episode. So we get this massive culmination of seasons and seasons of character growth and development and those two forming a relationship. And then it's all just sort of done. And even Nikolai Coster-Waldau, the actor who played Jaime, was open with the fact that when he had to act for that scene, it was really tough for him because it was so quick. He had to take a long time and sit down and in his head go through this week-long process of okay, what would my interaction be first and then set, and so he could get himself prepared for that. There's I think Joanna Robinson of Vanity Fair wrote a really good article where she interviewed him and he talked about it. So even for the actors, it was tough.
Yeah, and Surnami, I'll turn to you now. Don't even get me started on the Jaime thing. I mean, I'm trying to keep... Look, I do want to talk a lot. I could do this for hours, guys, but I'll try to sort of stay out of the fray as much as I can so we can let you guys sound off on it. But the Jaime thing was infuriating for me, as much so as the somewhat lack of resolution to the prince that was promised, sort of whether you call it a B or a C storyline or whatever it was. I got another big kind of lost flashback there where I was like, oh, unfinished stuff left on the table. Don't do that to me. But Surnami, is there anything else that either really irritated you in terms of not being finished, or did you reflect on the fact that, as was mentioned as well, Benioff and Weiss were kind of being drawn away to this Star Wars project, and they were basically, the sentiment is that they were just over it. Did you get that feeling?
Oh, definitely. And also what annoyed me is that this story has so much, so many magical elements to it. And it's they completely ignored all of it. They got rid of it as fast as they could. And then it's just heartbreaking to me. That, and then love stories, John and Dany were in love, really? When did this happen? They did it, and then they were in love? I don't know. This is weird, but yeah.
You will always be my queen.
Well, yeah, I've got to disagree a little bit there with the fact that I don't think they don't care. I think it comes back to what you said earlier, which is about choice. And I think one of the things that was really strong was the way that the stuff looked. The cinematography on it. At the end of the day, we don't know how much George R.R. Martin gave them. We don't know whether it was on a sticky note with 5 bullet points of this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. Get us there, and how much they had to invest on it. I think the fact that they did a 50-night shoot on one battle tells you they are invested. They're into it, and I think it was just a sort of choice thing where they wanted to make it look good. They wanted to hit all the parts thematically possible. I'm not defending the point that they didn't nail so many parts. And one of the things that has made Game of Thrones has been the storytelling. And they just didn't fulfill a lot of the things with the storytelling. It's just difficult. You don't know how much they were given from George R.R. Martin.
You're waiting for the prince that was promised. Just wait for the books. I kind of like the way that the show broke away from prophecy, because a big chunk of me is I make my own destiny. And I like that Arya killed the Night King.
It's an interesting point about the show breaking away with the destiny, because I was a little muddled with the end, which is another criticism I would have, is that in terms of what to take away in terms of themes or whatever, it was tough because the destiny thing. So they sort of move away from the prophecies and who's the prince who promised, does it really matter? But like at the end of the day, it seems to have been a strong statement on you can never escape your destiny or your nature. You know, they talk about that with Dany. But then they just have one conversation about that. It's Jon and Tyrion in the final episode. And it's, you know, Tyrion saying, well, it's just her nature. So I guess that's what it is. Everyone just, you know, and Jaime had that too, like just going back to who he always was, quote unquote, could never escape it. But then Jon goes, oh, well, if that's true, then why am I not crazy too? And then they just sort of ended on a, So I don't like that. That's an interesting point, but I think they just didn't want to deal with the prophecy. I don't think they were making any grand statement about it.
Hmm. And they've always got that freedom of artistic license there, obviously. Like, and, you know, J.J. Abrams from Lost was sort of, you know, as I alluded to earlier, that seen as somewhat the king of this, where it's like, just because something is raised doesn't mean it needs to be concluded. And I appreciate that. It can be frustrating for fan bases, though, to have all these really, really intriguing plot lines raised. And like, it's like, that wasn't us taking the ball and running with it. You were jamming this prince that was promised stuff down our throats, albeit not all the time, but it came up consistently enough that perhaps I feel a resolution was somewhat warranted. But I do appreciate as well that, you know, as a writer, you don't need to tie off every last loose end. I do appreciate that. Michaelbolt, just to sort of extrapolate a bit more on something that you said, I also have gotten into this with a few of the guys at work, in that I have no doubt that, you know, the showrunners and everyone, the prime goal here effectively was to make Game of Thrones the most stunning spectacle on TV. And they did that. You know, it was a beautiful, beautiful, amazing production. The battles, everything. Sorry, one sec, guys.
Your cat's still pissed off about how Lost ended, I think.
I know, one sec.
Feed me, human.
The battles and everything, you know, everything looks A+. I can't give them enough credit for that. It is, you know, almost more stunning than things that you see on the big screen. You know, it's to their credit. But whether or not that same love and affection to the look or the gloss of the production was afforded to the actual narrative and the writing. Now, I don't want to heap shit on the writers. You know, I still feel that there is something that's, you know, been left incomplete, and I think the ball has been dropped. And I know some people sort of don't appreciate it when a lot of flack goes the way of creatives, and it's like, hey, it's their choice, and, you know, that's something they've decided to do. They are the writer. They are not open to, well, effectively some people seem to suggest that they're not open to criticism, but I somewhat disagree with that, in that constructive criticism can come the way of the production. But I'd be opening it up to you guys now and saying, you know, do you agree that it was the most stunning thing I've seen for a while, but whether or not the same love and affection was afforded to the script?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you brought up Lost, so can we just not bring that up in this? I can't deal with Game of Thrones and Lost in one thing. I'm still pissed off.
Sure thing.
I think the writers did their best.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they.
Question is, was their best any good?
Could you have done better? I mean, that's a legitimate question. What better writers could they have gotten to do this? Joss Whedon?
Anyone?
Surnami.
They did drop the ball. They did drop the ball. I mean, if you draw other parallels to it, I mean, yes, it did look good, but the storyline is the key with it. But I think it comes down to people becoming precious about what is value to them. And I think you've seen it in other things. So like, with the most recent episode of Star Wars, when you have that scene of like Luke Skywalker drinking the alien titty milk, like, do you remember this scene?
Oh yeah.
There's so many people that are like, yeah, that's an artistic statement. Like, I like where he's taking it, but there's so many people that are just like, that is not my like Luke Skywalker. I'm gonna walk out. And I suppose the other one for me was my first love with fantasy. And we're all like fantasy lovers here because we're on here talking about Game of Thrones. We're talking about World of Warcraft. My first love was The Hobbit. And then with Peter Jackson's version of The Hobbit, the first time I watched it, I almost walked out during the scene where there's the giant dwarf made out of gold. And I said to myself, if this dwarf comes alive and starts fighting Smaug, I'm gone. I'm walking out. You've desecrated it. And then after you watch the sort of behind the scenes of it, and I don't know if any of you have watched the behind the scenes thing, and if you enjoy the behind the scenes thing of things. The Hobbit's one of the best behind the scenes things. You sort of allow him his sort of vision of it, and it's a different telling of the story. And I think what hurts people is that season 1 to 4 of Game of Thrones, when you listen to the audiobook, when you read the book, when you watch the series, is so accurately transcribed. They hit so many of the characters on the head. They create so many of the places exactly how you imagine it. And that's just such a vast difference to what season 8 is. You just don't get that depth. You don't really feel like the characters are the characters that you've come to know. They're not even speaking the same sort of lines. I mean, you've seen the memes where they're saying, like, that's an amazing line you just said. I thought we won't have good writing this season. Oh no, that's a line from like a few seasons ago. And I think that's where people have kicked off, is because it feels like someone else has directed it. It feels different to season 1 to 4, and it's not what people bought into.
And I think that's one thing about the writing, because I do sort of agree that I think saying that they didn't care at all is probably a little too harsh. I think they would have just walked away if that was the case. But we have to remember that before Game of Thrones, these guys didn't have much under their belt. So D.B. Weiss, I think he'd written one book, which is called Lucky Wander Boy in 2003. And that was it. That was all he had done. Benioff had much more screenwriting sort of experience. But even that, I'm going to just read. So he wrote The 25th Hour. He wrote Troy. He wrote X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, that's not a killer's row, you know what I mean? That's not a murderer's row. No. So, they signed on, and this is a good point that Michaelbolt was making, which is that they signed on to do an adaptation. And so I think it is tough that they had to get away from that, because a lot of the early episodes, they're borrowing heavily from the books. George R. R. Martin was there. George R. R. Martin wrote episodes, and Martin had a lot of experience writing in television just to earn a living for a long time. They had Jane Espenson, another amazing writer, Brian Cogman. So they had a lot of help, and they were adapting. Once it started to move away from that, and once they took more creative control, I think what we've seen a lot of is not necessarily them not caring. I think we're seeing that they are maybe greener than we thought they were in the field of writing original content for television, not just adapting.
They definitely should have reached out for help. They should have asked other writers to assist them.
Well, at this point, guys, I just want to take it down. Now that we've sort of generally covered our feelings about GoT and Season 8 and the conclusion and everything, I should get us on track. And obviously, I promised everyone at the start that we'd relate this back to WoW. Now is that time. So I'll open this up, and some of you have taken really extensive notes on this, and I really, really do thank you for the homework that you've done. And we're going to talk about perhaps some of the parallels between World of Warcraft and Game of Thrones. Obviously, two pieces of work that are steeped in high fantasy, and, we see some of the same narratives and character arcs and whatnot coming up through game and book and TV show, if you will. So what I wanted to ask is, more generally at the outset, did you guys see anything similar in the way in which the narrative of WoW has evolved over the years, or the way in which they've decided to tell their story, and the way in which Game of Thrones, let's say on TV, has evolved over the years? A lot of people, very rabid fan base on both sides, there's no doubt. And, it seems to be a lot of people feel that the narrative of Game of Thrones did somewhat fall by the wayside as George's books were no longer there. And, some people feel that World of Warcraft's narratives has gone in different directions as well. Obviously, whether there was much of a story at the outset of vanilla, I feel there was. I enjoyed the way the narrative was told through quest texts and what have you, and just sort of little hints and inklings and of what was going on around in Azeroth. And then obviously that is much more shoved in your face as we go by expansion and expansion. And I'll just start with anyone in general. Feel free to jump in. How did you feel about the way in which those two stories are told? Do you think there's differences or similarities?
They both had to try to get larger than life. So they start off on small scale stories. You see Dany, going through the Dothraki Sea and growing as an individual character. In classic WoW, you're growing as an individual character. In the later editions, you see these epic battles, and just like in WoW, you're constantly getting buddy to buddy with Jaina Proudmoore. And I think by having to get to that scale, they've lost the nuance to the beauty of the story.
One thing I find it's an interesting parallel is just like we were saying, with no matter what you want to say about the story itself, the visuals of Game of Thrones, the technology, the music is stunning. I feel like the same is true for WoW, where pretty much since Warcraft 3, throughout all WoW, I mean, whatever you want to say about the story behind the cinematics or the dialogue or the writing, stunning. Like, you get incredible cinematics, amazing music just across the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to agree with the previous comment that he said. One of the great things that works with Game of Thrones is that you casually introduce the magic over time. Like, when you first introduce the story, dragons are extinct. They don't exist anymore. And then you sort of get a room, you see a dragon egg, then the dragons hatch. It's only until sort of like book 2 that Melisandre comes in and you see her gradually using powers. And then by the time you're in and you're brought into the characters, that's when she births the shadow baby, what the hell scene. And then you're already in by then. I suppose WoW does it similarly, not in, you have magic straight away, but you only start off with 1 or 2 spells, don't you? You're sort of like eased into the process. And then by the time you're level 60, you're spending more and more talent points. You're an expert. But it's one of the things that Game of Thrones does really well, because I managed to get my wife into it, who's into fantasy a little bit. But if it started off like it is in season 5 and 6, there's no way I think half its viewer base would have watched it.
As these kind of series go on, like WoW in the game and the WoW cinematics and Game of Thrones, when they do start running out of that source material and they start looking forward and thinking like, okay, what are we going to do going out? They start to look at their fan base and they start, having the people that are consuming their content influence their decisions. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's not good. And sometimes it seems kind of clinical, very much on data. It's like, okay, 60% of our fans love this direction, Sylvanas burning Teldrassil. 40% don't. We're going to take this option because there's more people that are like it. And that's just, it just kind of sucks when that happens.
The differences between them is Game of Thrones is a fixed timeline, right? They knew their story was going to end. I think story's ending is a good thing. WoW has no fixed timeline. They have to keep it going to keep their business model going. That's going to lead to a very different, almost long-winded story.
Well, we've just raised one of the big points, and this is one of the things I want to get into in terms of character parallels as well. And we just heard about the Sylvanas storyline, and a lot of people are equating that to what we see with Dany, and obviously the burning of Teldrassil, the burning of King's Landing or whatnot, just basically making these really drastic decisions on somewhat of a whim. I'd love to hear someone's take on the Sylvanas-Dany parallel, and also if there's any other characters that you felt were so obviously showing the same traits between Game of Thrones and World of Warcraft. Anyone?
I personally think Arthas and Dany are a better parallel than Sylvanas and Dany.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, well, so Arthas falling from grace. The reason I think that was a good storyline is because he started off as a paladin. Yeah, he was kind of peevish and stuff, but when he fell into grace, because you're playing him in the first-person view, well, I should say first-player view, you got to see why he fell, right? And it was very emotional. Well, yeah, I think that was arguably the biggest problem with the Dany story is, well, Emily Clark did a fantastic job when she was on the back of that dragon. You saw that conflict in her eyes and that torment that she was having. And when she snapped, that was really well played. I think that could have been stretched for another episode or two, but that was also a similar fall from grace.
To be fair to the Sylvanas analogy, I think obviously in Warcraft 3 we saw, sort of the virtuous protector that she was before she was turned into a banshee as well. So there was somewhat of that fall from grace as well. But I appreciate that the Arthas thing is there perhaps equally as well. But I mean, just that moment of the burning of Teldrassil where it's, and I'm not overly familiar with the storyline of Retail. I somewhat keep tabs of it, but you guys will know more than me. But it seems to be that the burning of Teldrassil did happen because she cracked the shits over a throwaway comment of a dying night elf, was it? And she went, all right, well, fuck it, I'll burn this place down. Now, Dany sort of did seem to whether or not it was a more of a drawn out thought of whether this was all pre-planned by her. It seemed to be a bit more in the moment where she had won the battle and just went, you know what? Screw it. Let's go the extra mile. I'd love to hear from the rest of you. Which do you think is a good parallel? Would it be Arthas or Sylvanas or perhaps someone else?
With the Sylvanas thing and the Daenerys thing, I think there's a really good parallel with the burning of Teldrassil and with like the burning of King's Landing, in that both times, I feel like I'm speaking generally here, both times the player base or the viewer base was a bit like, well, what the hell? And I think it's primarily down to, I mean, you see the scenes of Daenerys sitting at the table, watching Jon Snow sort of be befriended. She speaks about this thing of like, I'm never going to be loved, so it has to be fear. And when you read Game of Thrones, every single chapter is titled of the person whose perspective it's from. And I think in season 8, we just didn't get enough perspective from Daenerys. You got all these, because there's so many characters, I think, involved by now. There's so many actors. And I think if we'd have got like a whole episode before that episode just from her perspective, you get more scenes of her brooding, you get more of that, then people would have understood it better. And at the same time with Sylvanas, you don't get any narrative. I mean, we got the video beforehand and it just seemed like it was a spur of the moment thing, but they didn't give us any foreplay. They didn't give us any description leading up to it. It's part of the genre, I suppose. When you get the books, we're going to get that. You know you're going to get that. It's disappointing that we didn't get that, but symptom of having one season to do it and a symptom of not showing the point of view from Dany as enough.
Surnami, I'd like to turn to you now, and you prepared a little bit of a document in preparation for this show, and I had a read of it, and it was fantastic. And now while we're going down this tangent of, you know, which characters you feel was shown in Game of Thrones somewhat through their traits, you came up with two amazing ones that I really want you to go into, if that's all right. And that was someone you thought was like Ned Stark and someone that you thought was like Jon Snow. Why don't you go into that a bit?
All right, so I'm gonna go way back. So I'm gonna start like with Durotan. I kind of compared him to Ned Stark because, you know, Honor killed both of them. So in a way, because Durotan like went to Doomhammer because how Gul'dan, you know, he was becoming evil, and they decided to go take him down. But when he was escorted by Doomhammer's warriors to a safe place, Durotan and Draco were brutally murdered by the warriors that were actually Gul'dan spies. So, and then Thrall was left to die, but was picked up by Blackmore. So like his honor that he didn't want to be part of Gul'dan's army kind of led him to his death. And then I also was kind of comparing Jon Snow to Thrall because, you know, they were both kind of, well, Jon went to the Watch and he kind of became a man there, where Blackmore picked up Thrall and he was raised, you know, I mean, he fought in like the pits and whatnot. And also when all this happened, the Frost Wolves were declared rebels and were cast out, you know, just like the Dire Wolves when they killed Ned Stark became kind of like outcast and were enemies of the crown. And also, like with Jon Snow and Thrall, you know, Thrall's also considered the Green Jesus. So, and Jon literally came back from the dead. So, I mean, and then like, you know, after everything was settled down, they kind of like disappeared and went into their own thing. Jon went up north and, Thrall just kind of went off and did his shaman stuff.
You guys agree with that? I think those are great.
Yeah. We've got to go back. That parallel is so good. I listened to half of the Lord of the Clans book today, like in preparation for this, and what you're describing, the similarities between Durotan and Ned Stark, they're both so tragic. I mean, I was listening to it today because I love listening to everything for audiobook. I was listening to him being honourable, and the first thing as well is when we play World of Warcraft, I rolled Alliance because I think, well, Alliance are the good guys. And it's only until you play, you learn about the orcs that they have this honor system that when you listen, when you read, when you see Duratan fall, it fills you with this whole thing of like, no, like people should be honorable, and it makes you want to act. And I mean, it's the same thing with Ned Stark. Like you want to act, but you can't because it's a book. So then you live through Robb Stark and his stuff, and you cheer the Starks on. It's why so many people love the Starks. But the beauty of Warcraft is you can act, you can go and act in honor. I think that's coming out of retail at the moment, but I mean, that's discussion for another day. But I just wanted to bring you back on, like, that's such a good parallel that you've drawn between those two. Like, I just want to focus on them two characters.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And if anybody just wants to pick one book, one Warcraft book, Lord of the Clans is that book. But I also have another comparison to Jon Snow.
Go for it.
My comparison is Varian. His alter ego is Logash, the Ghost Wolf. So he kind of embodies that wolf persona, especially when he's in combat, and it kind of helps him. It helped him survive when he was a gladiator. He had that kind of time in his life where he had amnesia and he didn't know who he was, and he got picked up and made a slave, and he kind of had to work his way up, and finally he kind of got back to being a king. And so that was kind of Jon Snow, like starting at the bottom and moving all the way up to being a king. And I love those. I love both characters. Like, both Jon Snow is my favorite character in Game of Thrones, and Varian Wrynn is my favorite WoW character by far.
So many parallels between Thrall and Varian Wrynn as well. Yeah. Like with them both being taken in as slaves by the other faction, both of them like rising up to then lead their faction. They're both such the early Warcraft writing is just so good. Some of the character stories it's just
yeah, for sure. And they have so much respect for each other.
This is a great parallel. These are great comparisons. I want to run with the Thrall as Jon Snow thing. And if we also go with the sort of Dany and Sylvanas comparison, I really think, even though a lot of their characteristics are not necessarily the same, Sourfang and Tyrion serve a lot of the same purpose. At least recently, right?
I like
it. Yeah, because Tyrion and Sourfang, right, both are advisors and sort of leaders to a leader who they are initially really on board with and a big part of, but then they see them act poorly and act a little bit mad and turn and then have to go find a savior figure, Thrall, Jon Snow, and be like, you are the one we need you to come back and save us.
That's so good. Yeah, you could put an image of Tyrion throwing his Hand of the King thing down the steps right next to Sourfang throwing his Horde necklace.
Absolutely.
Never realized all of that.
I was trying to think of one for Arya earlier, and the one I came up with her was Garona Half-Orcan.
Yep.
Oh, sure. Interesting.
What, just in terms of the sort of rogue assassin thing, or a bit more with their characters as well?
Like they come of, they're of two worlds at the same time and had to learn to kind of be a member of both.
Right. Had rough childhood.
Now, guys, I'd ask this in terms of, we'll talk about also just quickly some of the, and I do want to sort of get back to that in a second, but just while I remember, Surnami, you also pointed out some amazing GoT references in game that everyone can go and look up online. There's a list there, but Surnami, if you can rattle through some of those shout outs that the devs put in.
Oh yeah, there are so many of them. So it starts off, you have, I don't know, I think it was in Legion, and you go into the mage class hall, you have, as the Archmage Melis, she even says, the night is dark and full of demons. I mean, it was just blatant there. And then, and Vanilla, and, in Arathi Basin, there's a wolf pup named Lady in the center. I don't know if you guys noticed that, running around. And then there's an NPC, Amelia Clark. She's located in Stormshield or Ashran, which is, the actress for Dany. And it actually says that her race is Dragonkin if you hover over her. And then, there's a gnome named Tyrion in the gardens of Stormwind Castle. I don't know if you guys remember, there's that quest where you bring the apples and the silk to make the lady spy bot. And it just is like, I feel like that's Tyrion, you know? It's all about boobs. Because they just dresses up like a woman. And then you have like the Night's Watch in Duskwood, and they're defending Darkshire from the undead, you know, from Ravenhill Cemetery and whatnot. And then you have John the Crow. That's more kind of like a nod, I think, to it. He's a ghoul in STV, where you get the spyglass. And then in Pandaland, you have the Shadow Pan faction, where they say we are the Watchers on the Walls, or we are the Sword in the Shadows, like the Night's Watch. They say I am the Sword in the Darkness, I am the Watchers on the Walls. There's a Song of Frost and Fire, of course, which is the I think that was Horde side, of course, when you go to meet Duratan. And then on the Lion side, you have a quest called Game of Thorns. And then there's a quest called A Dance with Dragons, which is, you know, the book number 5 title, which is a Legion quest with Stella Good.
I loved some of the items you point out. I'll go through them for you to give you a break, but thanks so much for sending them through. We had Sirio's gloves of tutelage, which is obviously a shout out to Sirio Farrell. They were some gloves with Agi on them, and the comments were, you know, what do we say to death? The coin
Not today.
That's right. The coin of many faces, which is a toy from the world event Hallow's End, and obviously a reference to the many-faced god. Sorry, I'm using your words verbatim here, Surnami. Thanks for making these notes. I'm just giving you a break so you can take a breath. The smoky direwolf, a mount that's dropped during WoD. It says that it's believed to reside mostly in the north and hates weddings. Bit of a funny shout out. Yeah. The Bear and the Lady Fair is a book that unlocks a challenge card for the Brawlers Guild. Much like obviously that famous episode with Brienne and Jamie, and also the song from the book too. Now, the Empty Crown is a Legion legendary that has a quote from Tyrion about Joffrey in the description. It's hard to put a leash on a dog once you've put a crown on its head. And so those are some great shout outs. And, you know, I'm sure there's more, but that's great shout outs to GoT in the game, which I thought were really, really cool to see in there. Now, one of the things that I really enjoyed, you know, particularly like the Night's Watch parallel with, the Watchers in Duskwood. You know, I think that's a great one. Have these, you know, and I mean, they're in rather, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not in black in Darkshire, but they're in rather drab clothing. You know, it's definitely not flashy, I don't think, but, I really did enjoy that being, given what is probably, even though they're from the area and they feel it's their duty, they haven't exactly been sent there to defend Darkshire, but given what is probably one of the shittiest jobs in the Eastern Kingdoms to defend Duskwood when, you know, the area is effectively being cut off because of what's happening to it, I thought that was a really fun, sort of parallel to see as well in the game. All right, guys. Well, look, Surnami, there were some other fun ones that you brought up, just sort of tongue in cheek, where you suggested that perhaps Jon Snow is Leroy Jenkins, runs into fights with no chance of winning, a la the Battle of the Bastards.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I could just see him going, Leroy Jenkins!
Yeah, absolutely. That's what he yelled at Viserion in the Battle of Winter.
Yeah. And I think the funniest one the Surnami came up with was, Surnami, tell us your thoughts on the Lion's Pride Inn.
Okay, so you get the Lion's Pride Inn. You know, lions like in Lannister. It's definitely Littlefinger's brothel. Come on. You know what goes on there. It's gotta be Littlefinger's brothel.
Very good. All right, guys. Well, look, we'll get back just to sort of, some final thoughts here, as we've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. And, Feydark, I'll turn to you, mate, and just sort of say, are there any other instances that you've noticed in the game and the way in which perhaps WoW is received now by the bulk of its consumers? Now, I felt that not so much that the fan base of GoT turned on it over the last couple of seasons, but there was a drastic shift in reception. You know, I enjoyed the show throughout. I really was a big fan of GoT, but the last 2 seasons really have had a different feeling for me. And while I'd stopped short of saying it was a dumpster fire, I feel that it really sort of fell by the wayside a little bit in terms of that narrative and the way in which they delivered the show. Now, some people might say that they get the same feeling from World of Warcraft, in that as the game goes on, we yearn back for yesteryear when, those first few, vanilla and the first few expansions, so great. And now it seems to be somewhat going, in a different direction, if I could put it sort of euphemistically. So I'd ask you, do you see a similar parallel, or do you think that WoW can right the ship again narratively or gameplay-wise and pull people back?
I'd really like to see the people that are watching Game of Thrones, like their viewership numbers, and see how it compares to the subscription numbers for World of Warcraft. Because we've known the subscription numbers have decreased. I'm curious to know what percentage of people have stopped. In regards to WoW changing, WoW has changed because it's no longer the game that it once was. It's gotten itself up in a big hurry. You're now constantly moving around. Adventures are really fast, where Classic is slow and slow paced. So it's not even really the same game.
Well, yeah, and that pacing is, people, obviously everyone on this call loves Classic. We love that slow paced, rewarding feeling of, venturing pace by pace towards a goal. And obviously through early GoT, as you've said, I love the slow-paced plot lines. And my favorite episode, well, not my favorite, I'd have to think about it. One of my favorite moments of Season 8 was that second episode where it sort of felt like old school GoT again, where it was, everyone just chilling out before the Battle of Winterfell, the slow moment by the hearth and the fire, and all these, dialogues and slow character moments. That is kind of what GoT was to me through those first few seasons, why I fell in love with it. And as you say, in WoW now, everything's kind of bam, 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 go, 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 instant rewards, like just in, out, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I love vanilla, which is the opposite. Does anyone else feel that that's kind of the way it's gone, or do you think that there is redemption in what WoW is doing now and what GoT ended up doing in sort of knocking it out a little bit quicker?
Well, so one thing that this really reminds me of, probably the best article I've read about the end of Game of Thrones was actually a Scientific American article, which is kind of weird, but would highly recommend everyone. It's called The Reason, I think it's like The Reason Everybody Hated Game of Thrones or something like that. It's a little harsh, but it goes into the fact that Game of Thrones shifted from basically a sociological story, a story that was about a huge cast of characters, and with not necessarily a single, protagonist and a single antagonist. And most importantly, was about the way people interacted and responded to society and to society's constraints and culture's constraints. We see that with Ned, where he's got this sense of honor, but how does that interact with people in King's Landing? How does Robb, who's this heroic figure, react to, he falls in love, and how does that impact everybody in the world? And The Wire is a show that does that kind of stuff, which is why so many people love The Wire. It's considered very good. It's because this is not a kind of storytelling you see a lot in television. But then over time, as it became later and later, and as it shifted from the books, it became a psychological story, meaning like basically it's about a hero's journey, right? Star Wars is a psychological story. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it does tend to become much more, okay, this person's a villain and this person's a hero and they're going to stab them and everybody's happy at the end and there you go. And interesting, World of Warcraft kind of had the same thing because vanilla, it was a sociological, it was about a society, a community, right? It was about everybody meeting other people and creating your own stories, and you weren't some hero, you were just another person, You don't get greeted by quest givers as, hello, great hero of Azeroth. You're hello, traveler. But then it became heroic. It became each person is some heroic, massive figure in the game, and every single person playing the game is the greatest hero in Azeroth. Except for the other millions of people playing. But don't think about them. So I think that's one of the bigger criticisms because. Oddly enough, TV has a hard time doing the sociological kind of stuff, which is why TV and movies, which is why most are that sort of like focused on, individuals and a hero and a villain. But games, it's a lot easier to do, especially MMOs. That's kind of what they're there for. But it's been interesting to watch WoW sort of move away from that, sort of become more almost like a single player RPG. So that's just an interesting parallel that I think sort of shows maybe a little bit why some people have had issues with both Game of Thrones and World of Warcraft as it's sort of evolved over the years.
Yeah, and I think that's why WoW Classic coming out is so important, because it's going to be interesting to see in like a year or even 6 months of how the community is going to react to everything and how it's going to affect the development of retail WoW in the years to come. Like, are they going to keep going down this path, or are they going to see kind of a different way to do it and how that's all going to shake out? I'm really interested.
I'll tell you, since I started the beta, I haven't even loaded up Battle for Azeroth.
A lot of people are saying the same thing.
Oh, you have a
I'm
beta?
currently in a raiding group in Battle for Azeroth, and I'm just...
Michaelbolt, I might turn to you finally just to wrap up on this point for your thoughts just in general, and then I'll get into a bit of fun stuff at the end to wrap up this call. But just your final thoughts on everything we've just said regarding, perhaps the change in attitude towards the way in which the content is delivered between GoT and WoW.
With World of Warcraft, I think one of their main things is they've been able to hype for the next thing coming. They've always been able to drop a new patch. They've been able to hype like something else that's coming out. I mean, you go back to vanilla and you think like, well, how are you going to beat every single moment that you're doing? They add in things like Molten Core. They add in things like Onyxia. You then go to Burning Crusade. You've got like flying mounts. You can finally be a shaman or a paladin. Wrath of the Lich King. You can finally kill the Lich King. You can fight Arthas how you were meant to. Cataclysm, Deathwing's back. Mists of Pandaria. You got a whole new continent. Horde and Alliance are at each other's throats again. You then go to Legion, and the Legion's back. You got to fight those back. You got artifact weapons, and then you move on to pirate theme. Jaina's back. They've got a really good ability to hype up new stuff, and they've got a really good ability to take you to worlds and places and give you like environments and civilizations. Like the difference between orcs and humans is so big. I think the problem with Blizzard, for me personally, I don't know if it's the same for everyone else, is I seem to play every expansion and do the first raid and then start to taper off. It becomes... Does anyone else get that same sort of thing?
In retail, you mean? Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, in general, every single time I think that, WoW's done, something seems to pull me back in.
Right.
Something seems to pull me back. And I've come back for every single expansion, but it's about that sustainability. And every single time I think about it, is I always think like, I wish I could just go back to when I was 13, 14 and just play Classic all over again. I'd just do that sort of thing differently.
No, I hear what you're saying, and it will be interesting, and obviously you're going to get your wish soon when Classic drops. But on that note, I might sort of wind it up on a bit of a fun note, and just sort of, we talked about, again, this has all been about parallels, and, getting back to some of the major characters that we see in Game of Thrones just for these last few minutes, talk about some of the, maybe classes or specs that you see in certain characters. And my thoughts, think of people like Jaime Lannister, whether it's pre or post injury, but you go, what was Jaime? Was he... I think I'd stop short of calling him a paladin. I think he was a warrior, but maybe he couldn't spec into dual wielding. What do you reckon?
That's definitely not bad.
Ouch.
What else do you think? We got Arya is the easier one in what, like an assassination or a subtlety rogue?
Yeah, clearly Arya is for sure.
Yeah, is she a subtlety or assassination though?
That's the tough one.
I think Littlefinger's definitely that guy who hides down in the deep run tram and offers you like gold for dirt.
I thought you were going to say he's the guy that hides down in the deep run tram and does ERP with people and then gets sprung.
That's it for sure.
That's pretty. He sort of like liaises it, doesn't he? He organises the people. Varys is probably the spam that you get from those accounts offering to sell you gold. That's what I feel like Varys is.
Yeah, Qyburn's a warlock for sure.
Yeah, I was going to go Melisandre as a fire spec warlock.
Yeah, here's the tough one, Jon Snow.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Paladin on him, just because he has a lot of honor.
I mean, Pat's Night in the Twitch chat made a good point that he's a hunter, except he keeps not taking care of his pets and they keep running away.
I love it.
It's just been soul stone.
That's exactly what happened. Melisandre put a soul stone on John. We didn't.
Is it Beric Dondarrion that gets brought back about 20?
Yeah, so you'd have Thoros. Thoros would be a paladin for sure, wouldn't he?
Yeah, Thoros is the warlock who is the best friend of the guild master who insists on being soulstoned.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, there's a number of different directions. I'm trying to think of what we could do for like Grey Worm, what we could do for Jorah. But they're all, I mean, everyone's basically a warrior at the end of the day in a way. I don't know. Maybe it's hard. It's not many rogues in GoT. Like Arya's the only one that comes to mind. Not many hunters. Maybe Ramsay Bolton, the hunter.
Oh yeah, he was. He was really
definitely.
Good. And he also used dogs.
Cooking trainer.
100%.
Yeah.
You go to Hopeye for your get to level 300 cooking quest.
You just make bread for the first 30 levels.
Yeah, and the Iron Islanders are all those people who really wanted to get their rep up with the Bloodsail Buccaneers, so they ruined their rep with everybody else.
Yeah.
Very good. And on that note, guys, look, we might wind it up. I can't thank all of you enough for taking part in this chat. It's been a lot of fun. Look, in all honesty, guys, I could do this for another 2 hours. It's a very, very deep chat, and there were points in that where I really wanted to keep going, but strictly time-wise, I had to sort of keep moving it along. But guys, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for being here, and I'll go through you all one by one. Surnami, thanks for coming back.
Thank you. I just have one last thing to say.
Go for it.
Lane Wren, brown of hair. Varian Wren, black of hair. Anduin Wren, golden hair.
Oh no!
He's not the rightful king. What has Tiffin been doing?
It's on. I love it. I love it. Chew on that for a while, everyone. And Tim, thanks so much for coming back, mate.
Yeah, it was great. That was a lot of fun.
Myph, it was your first time. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, for sure. It was great. I really appreciate you taking me on. And yeah.
My pleasure. And Feydark, thanks again for stopping by for your first time.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And Michaelbolt, thanks so much. You did some heavy lifting in this one, mate. You were fantastic. Thanks so much for stopping by. Very good. I'll see you all later, guys. Hi everyone, Josh here. I just want to take a quick moment to remind you that while Countdown to Classic will always be a podcast you can get for free, if you do happen to really enjoy the show and find yourself always coming back for more, then please do check out the show's Patreon page to see how you can help keep the lights on at Countdown to Classic and even vote on show content as the show continues to bring you more and more classic WoW goodness. Alternatively, if monthly subscriptions aren't your thing, you can always visit the show's tip jar over at Ko-Fi, with that link being in the show notes and on the website too. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, it's time for another Countdown to Classic call, and we've got a return caller, Turner. It's so good to have you back on the show.
Hey, nice to hear from you again.
Mates, I enjoyed our chat last time. Obviously, we heard all about some of the issues you had with flight paths and smelting times and things like that. And then we discussed some of the the length of time that you spent playing druids in the game, and I enjoyed that chat. So now we're back here talking about another interesting point that you raised to me when we were sort of playing the game together, and we started casually talking, and you mentioned that you had an interesting story about the way in which WoW affected your time at college. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's interesting. I guess that's up to other people to decide.
Oh, it grabbed me.
Yeah. So I started actually playing WoW my junior year of high school, pretty casually, and my friends got me into it. And so I started playing probably 2 years. About that time, I started being able to kind of pick my own schedule, do my own thing type thing. And I was in college. And so, I would play for an hour or two. That 2 hours became 3 hours. And that 3 hours became, my first all-nighter playing WoW. And, WoW just took a hold. It became like who I was. I don't know. It's just weird. But like I would start to miss class because of it. And I remember missing a final and thinking to myself, it doesn't matter because I'm probably failing the class anyway because I've been playing WoW the whole time. And I really got to get my epic mount. And the final happened to be the time that I got my epic mount on my lock. So I skipped that final. So
wow.
Like my schedule, it's really sick, to be honest. It's really unhealthy. Like I would wake up at like 8 or 9 in the morning and I would play WoW, skip food, skip anything, and just play WoW until the afternoon when I would get too hungry. And then I would go to the cafe or whatever and get food and come back and just play with friends more till like 2, 3 in the morning, and then just keep doing it like over and over and over again. And it's just like not healthy. Like I look back now and I got, I have a wife and 2 kids and responsibilities and a career and like all that stuff. So it's like I'm a lot more grounded now, but like I was definitely not grounded, and I was just like lose myself in the game. It's just the game is a perfect, like WoW is a perfect game. It was a perfect game, like a perfect storm of like just it grabbed you. And so eventually I got a letter from the college saying you're no longer welcome here. At that time I had a 0.68 GPA, which is not good. So I dropped out or got kicked out, and then I joined the military. And so I always say I joined the military because of WoW. Probably about 2 months into basic training. So there's like 8 weeks and then another 8 weeks, but I did some combat arms stuff. So like it was all one station unit training or OSET. And so I went 2 months, and then eventually I got sick of where I was at compared to like, I was like, man, I was going to college. That was so awesome. Like, why did I blow it? And so I wrote a letter to the readmission board and they accepted me back. And so because I was on 0.68 GPA, I was on academic probation when I got back. And so I'm like, I'm not going to mess this up again. And so I got a 4.0 that next semester back.
Wow.
And so the funny thing is that I made Dean's List. So I was on Dean's List, but because of my cumulative GPA was under the threshold, I was not only on Dean's List at the same time, but I was on academic probation. So I was on academic probation and Dean's List at the same time.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And mate, obviously everything, all's well that ends well. As you say, you righted the ship eventually and turned things around, and that's great. What were you studying at the time, if I can ask?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's in music education, and then I have a master's in educational leadership, and I currently teach K through 12.
Excellent. Now, it's something that we've touched on, through the show in a few episodes now. We've talked about things like, WoW addiction and, playing the game too much and all that jazz, and not so much going down that path now, but focusing more on, and you've set it up so well with that opening sort of story, but talking more maybe to some younger listeners that might be listening in, even if they're older listeners, people who are going through school, trying to get, either their just to finish high school or trying to get their, college degree or what have you, or if they're going through a master's or a PhD or whatever it might be. Obviously we love WoW. We consume it en masse, but it is something that needs to be taken in moderation if you want to have your real life sort of stay on the rails as well. And as someone who's been through that, would you have advice for people who are just going through the school grind, but still want to enjoy a bit of WoW at the same time?
Yeah, as you're saying that, I almost think of my druid and I think, oh, well, I have so much mana, and, certain fights, you can't burn your mana in the first minute because it's a marathon. You can't play WoW like you can't sprint WoW. You're going to burn out. So if you enjoy WoW, take it at a pace that you can actually get through life,
Were you finding that
balancing I mean, obviously initially it was a struggle, but later on when you went back to school, you were still playing the game when you were now achieving a 4.0 GPA. Were you just keeping a regimented WoW schedule, going only X amount of hours per day or anything like that?
Yeah, I was a little bit more casual, but I did raid. That was probably Wrath of the Lich King. I made a couple of friends when I went back to school, met my wife, but yeah, we were pretty much, I think college is one of the places that it's really easy to still be social and play WoW, because you can have a couple of friends from your dorm in there playing with you, raiding with you.
Around campus, I'm not sure what school you're at or if you're at liberty to say, but would you find that WoW would come up casually in conversation with some of your fellow students at all if you brought it up?
I don't think WoW is ever a casual conversation. If you get in a conversation with anybody that plays WoW, it's like people that don't play WoW are going to get annoyed being around you, because you just you're always talking about it. It's like, oh man, we rated blah, blah, blah.
Right. So would you find yourself at your school getting into those kind of chats?
Yeah. I look at colleges now and they have straight up esports complexes. It's like what used to be kind of a faux pas to be a gamer. Now it's dude, they got it all laid out for them.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that, with the explosion of esports popularity and sort of, I guess what you would call the real world embracing that sort of part of digital life, I've seen the universities start to take it on board as well, which has been really interesting. And as we talk about, it's been brought up on the show a few times going, we're just in the early ages of esports. Obviously, it's we look back at professional sports leagues, what the NBA was like in the 30s, what the NFL was like in the, 20s or what have you. And that's where we are with esports now. So it's interesting to see so early academic institutions of all the places actually starting to embrace it as well.
Yeah, it's pretty, on one hand, it's pretty awesome. On the other hand, it kind of is scary for people who really, really enjoyed WoW for the recreational aspect, because to me, esports is so against what WoW originally was. Vanilla is like a recreational game at its core, I think. I mean, there's always going to be hardcore raiders, but I think that when I get on WoW, before achievements anyway, I remember just getting on WoW and being like, I'm going to go help whoever needs help, or I'm going to get on WoW and see what's going on. I would get on and I would have no inclination of what I was going to do that day, but there would always be something to do or some people to help.
Well, look, Turner, thanks so much for sharing that story with us. I'm so glad to sort of hear that, as I said, all's well that ends well. You went back to school. I think it's really big of you to have written that letter to apply for readmission, and they took you back, and obviously you kicked ass with the grades, and you're doing really well now. Congrats on where you are in life. Congrats with the family and everything. And thanks so much for calling in again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And that's the show for today, everyone. But be sure to tune in next week as we have even more calls for you. So listen in then for more Countdown. But before we go, let's go through some thank yous, and a big thank you as always to patrons. 8 Count, Aero PC, Anti, Binger, Brandon K, Callum F, Chunky Dunk, CJ, Connor C, Damien A, David F, David J, DJ M, Dufficus, Goat Rope, Hurlbert, James S, Jamie S, John HC, Josh W, Michael H, Minoru, Patrick J, Randall H, Rasmus S, Rarebit, Rick S, Ryan K, Schmige, Sylvia K, Tim B, Tim S, Torbjorn C, Voikora, and Zudamos. And of course, the very dedicated patrons of Countdown to Classic. An extra special shout out and thank you from the bottom of my heart to Alice R, Billy C, Daniel K, Eddie S, Eric S, Firespittin' Kitten, Flozy B, Freaky Fritz, Ida B, Batlord, Carl W, Nick B, Palfurus, Sarah S, Surnami, The Anton, Wilson Ma, Vanafak, and Velarco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be on the air without your support. And one final very, very special shout out to the lovely Patricia. My love, my darling, happy 1 year anniversary. You have made me the happiest man in the world over the last 12 months, and I cannot thank you enough for all of your support and love over that time. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I can't wait for the time that's yet to come. So thank you. I love you. That's it, everyone. I'll see you next time.